Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khair for joining us on the Thought Adventure podcast. And today we're going to be discussing what's logic got to do with it. Alhamdulillah, I was waiting for Yusuf. I got the message that Yusuf
came out of nowhere.
It came out of nowhere. Yusuf and Abdurrahman were like putting the kids to sleep, so I was a bit like, should we start or should we not? Should we wait for him? But alhamdulillah, at least Yusuf's here and Jake obviously is here. So we're going to be discussing about the topic, what's logic got to do with it. As always, we'll have an introduction for the first 45 minutes or so, and then we'll offer opportunities for people to join us in the discussion today. Generally related to the topic, but obviously we might expand it out a little bit if there's other people wanting to ask other things. So Yusuf, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
How's things, bro? How's what's been happening? Anything new? Anything exciting?
No, I've just been spending the day with my daughter, and I found out that there's a good way to get her to like tidy up. Is I've developed this system where I just say, I'll give you 60 points if you can tidy up all your mess in the living room. And she goes, 60 points? I'm like, yeah, 60 points. And so then she just runs around and blasts the living room. I go, so you got 60 points, and then 20 points if she's a good girl. And, and she goes straight to bed and no messing about. But then I end up bloody falling asleep while I'm putting her to bed as well. And so, hence me being a little bit.
Salam's Jake, how's things, man? What's been happening with yourself?
Salam. Nothing really. Just preparing for a debate with Samuel Green next Sunday. So a week from today, inshallah.
Oh, that should be exciting. What's the topic?
Yeah, is the incarnation coherent?
Okay.
So obviously I'll be arguing no, and Samuel will be arguing that yes, it is. And that'll be on the SE Dawah channel next Sunday, inshallah.
So hopefully, inshallah, the viewers from here will be able to check Jake's discussion debate out with Reverend Samuel Green. Reverend.
Yeah.
So inshallah, let's begin inshallah with the discussion today. So today we're talking about the idea. Really, let me maybe give you a bit of a background. As I'm sure the viewers know, Jake's a no nonsense type of guy. Yeah. If he's alhamdulillah, we keep him. He's generally chilled on our channel, but he is generally a no nonsense type of guy. And one thing that really perturbs him, he really hates, gets really, is when people start using words like it's a contradiction, or it's illogical, it's a logical contradiction, things like this, or it's logically incoherent, I'm doing an internal critique, and these types of things. And so what happens is that people tend to throw out these words like it's illogical or logically impossible or impossible without really understanding what they're saying. And so we thought, we obviously did agree, but also Jake was like, no, we've got to do a show on this topic. Yeah. He pulls rank and he tells us we've got to do a show on the topic of logical contradiction and logical impossibilities. Yeah. And to understand this, because I think it will help the discussion further, particularly those people who disagree with us. They will understand better what it means to present an argument, and hopefully inshallah that'll be a good thing. So maybe just first couple of questions that I was going to ask the brothers here is
we've got Abdul in the house.
Salams Abdul.
Captain Abdul, how you doing, bro?
Alhamdulillah. So the first question I was going to ask was just generally, why is logic important? Sometimes people just sort of think, man, logic, what's all that about? I don't know, Yusuf, if you want to give it like a very brief why logic is important.
Yeah,
or is it important?
Yeah, definitely it is. So it relates to argumentation, and it relates to specifically the connection between statements and whether or not something does follow from something else. And so when we're talking about logic specifically, it's about arguments. It's about you have something that you think people should believe. You have a proposition that you want people to hold, or you want them to do something. So either you want them to believe something or to act and do something in the world. And then you give justifications or reasons in order to motivate them in order to do it. And those justifications and those reasons necessarily lead to the conclusion that you want them to believe, either in terms of necessity or probability. So necessity, this would be called a deductive argument. So you've got a number of propositions, proposition 1, proposition 2, and then you have a conclusion which follows from that, and there's no debate about it. Like a good example that's usually given on this is Socrates is a man.
All men are mortal. Yeah.
Yeah, jumping on it. There we go.
And, no, I was saying all men are mortal is normally the first one that they give. First premise.
Well, to be honest, with logic, the order doesn't matter. So the premises 1 and 2 can be either way. What matters is that the conclusion follows from these. So Socrates is man, all men are mortal, or all men are mortal, Socrates is a man. Therefore, Socrates is a mortal. And this does follow from the conclusions, and it necessarily follows. Now, this is to do with logic. Now, whether or not something is logical or not is separate from the notion of its truth. So we begin by discussing about validity, and we can talk about whether or not certain premises are true later on. And this is in reference to what we call, it's whether or not the argument is sound. A sound argument is when it is both valid, that is, the conclusion necessarily follows from the premises, and the premises are true. If the premises are all true, the conclusion necessarily follows, therefore, the conclusion is necessarily true. And this is obviously deductive reasoning. And then you have inductive reasoning, which is to talk about probability. So you're talking in terms of like, most of the swans that I've seen are white. There are swans at the local park. The next time I go there, it's likely that those swans will be white. And you're saying it's likely here because you're open to the possibility that there are other kinds of swans. For example, there are black swans. So there is a small possibility that you will see one. And so it's not illogical to make reference to the fact that it's very likely that whatever swan you do see, that the swan will be white. Because this is, again, it's making reference to chance, to possibility. And you're making an inference to that which is most likely. So that's inference. And there are some others that we can get into them as well if you like, but those are the basic ones.
Yeah.
And
so obviously
this is why it's important. Yeah.
So you got a deductive syllogisms, you have inductive syllogisms, you have abductive syllogisms. But maybe Jake, maybe if I could ask you, how necessary is it? Because obviously, you have a special branch of, studying in philosophy of logic. You have specialist logicians. Are we basically saying you can't have a valid argument, you can't have any discussion about these types of topics unless you've studied in-depth logic?
No, we're not saying that, but I do want to give a bit of background. This is what Sharif was saying about why I think this subject is important and why I requested it. Because we're getting into the realities. We're on this channel in particular, we use a lot of sort of rational argumentation for justifying beliefs, discussing other worldviews, discussing points. And part of that discourse is being able to recognize good arguments and bad arguments, right? And then trying to follow through the conversation with the points that are being made. And I think and I'm not speaking for myself here because I think the other brothers agree, what we notice is that many times when talking to other people, and obviously we're not perfect, but when talking to other people, they at times make arguments that they think they're pointing out a contradiction in our worldview or somebody else's. And this happens with Muslims as well. So it's not like I'm picking on atheists or Christians or anything like that. But it happens so frequently. And what we started to realize is that people don't really understand what actually a contradiction is, what a good argument is, what a bad one is. And so that's why we wanted to do this stream, to try to clarify things so that the type of discourse that we're having on tap, people can do their best with this maybe video as a very basic level thing. And obviously it's not going to cover everything, but as a basic level foundation for the type of discourse that we have on tap. So that's primarily the reason why I suggested it. And the other brother said, well, yeah, that's basically a good idea. So yeah, now getting back to the issue, Sharif, what exactly was your question again?
Yeah, so I was just saying that, because logic can be quite complex. You have things like first order logic, fuzzy logic, and then you have classical logic. So the question then becomes, how much do you need to know these things in order to make in order to build a worldview, in order to understand arguments and ideas? Is it the case I have to go and study logic at a high level before I can really build an argument? Or
no. So what I would argue is that the basic type of reasoning, or when we're talking about logic here, we're talking about a particular way of reasoning. Now, I know that in the title of the video, we're going to eventually get to contradictions. But the basic way of reasoning from one premise to another and having a conclusion that follows validly by the rules of inference from the premises, that's what a valid argument is. A valid argument is one in which the conclusion follows from the premises, right? And then a sound argument is one in which not only is the structure of the argument valid, but the premises are true. And because the conclusion follows from the premises, that if they're true, the conclusion is also true. Now, this might sound like, oh, well, Jake, you just went off on this, and this proves that you do need to study. No, this is just the type of words that are used in the vocabulary. Sorry, guys, that is used to explain this idea. But this sort of reasoning process is, I would argue, is intuitive. It's something that we do every day. People do it every day. Like, oh, okay, I'm waiting for the car to turn. So, if I were to turn now, he would hit me. And everybody understands in their daily activities, without even really knowing what they're doing, they're going through a reasoning process, which are using like if then, for example, conditional statements. Well, if I do this, then this will happen, right? And then they're saying, well, I don't want that to happen, therefore I'm not going to do this, right? So it's like, well, if I just go ahead and go through the red light, I'm going to get hit by a car, and I don't want to get hit by a car, therefore I'm not going to just burst through the red light.
You see children doing the same thing as well. Yeah. So they don't want to get into trouble, and they know if this happens, then I will get into trouble. Therefore, I don't want this to happen. So they know they have to conceal certain information, or they need to avoid certain kind of things, or like if they have done something, they have to think of ways in order to sort of get away with these.
And we found out recently from Brother Yusuf that when you actually incentivize the children and tell them that they're going to get points for things that they do, they're less likely to try to conceal these things and be naughty. So, so that was good. But yeah, that's another example. So you can even see this type of behavior. I think Yusuf's point was very early on, even in a child. And so we're giving sort of examples that explain what we mean by a basic reasoning process that everybody undergoes. And nobody's thinking like, people think in terms of that vocabulary. Well, if I do this or this, and sometimes it happens so fast in the mind that you don't even realize that you're doing it. But the point is, to answer Sharif's question, is everybody engages in their daily life in this basic reasoning process. And sometimes some people do it more consistently than others. Sometimes you make a mistake. There are certain things that maybe we'll get to it later on, as sort of pointing out the most common fallacies in reasoning that people make without necessarily recognizing it. And so you don't need to study philosophy or logic at a university to be able to reason properly, although I think it would help because it points out some of the common mistakes that people make, and to be aware of them and know how to avoid them is a good thing. But on a very basic level, reasoning from one premise to another to a conclusion is intuitive. People do it on a daily basis. And what we want to do with this stream is just point out more in detail how that works, what are some of the traps that people fall into, what exactly a contradiction is and what it isn't. And so that maybe it'll facilitate for future discussions on tap, not just the audience, but us as well, to be clear on, how we're going to proceed and how these conversations should be analyzed, basically.
Yeah. Abdul, inshallah, I'll bring you in. So really another question I just wanted to ask is, could you just really briefly talk about like the three main propositions that exist? Yeah, obviously, for the audience and everybody who's listening today.
You're asking Abdul,
this is
right?
Yeah, Abdul, yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Unmute, yeah. But I'm just saying for the audience as well, is that this is really basic stuff. We're not going into some, crazy detail or anything like that. I'm sure the brothers here can go into more detail, but I just want to make it so clear, so easy, so that people can understand the basic, bare minimum levels of a good argument or good discussion. So I don't know, Abdurrahman, if you want to just give some sort of.
Sorry, I didn't hear the answer. I apologize.
Yeah, the question was
the question. Sorry.
Yeah. The question was can you just briefly outline what the three main propositions are? Well, actually, just could you explain what a proposition is as well? Maybe that's
a proposition is just a proposition is basically like in philosophical language, it's called a truth bearer. It's basically a sentence that contains a truth value. It's either true or false. So that's basically what a proposition is.
Right. Okay, then. So could you explain maybe what are the three main propositions that we have?
Are you talking about the laws of logic?
Well, yeah.
So
not the laws of logic. Sorry, not the laws of logic. It's a proposition. So
in terms of modality, yeah, okay, yeah. So
they're saying that Brother Sharif is a gem here. By the way, we had a recent argument. Who's the favorite that the audience has on tap? I think it's becoming more clear. People love Sharif, but that's okay. It's fine, guys.
Yeah.
But anyway, go ahead.
So in terms of modality, so in terms of like logically possible, logically necessary, and impossible. So we have statements that are logically possible. A statement that is logically possible is basically a statement that is not a contradiction or does not entail a contradiction. Now, a contradiction is simply, the conjunction
we'll get onto
of
contradiction.
A and not A. Yeah. Okay, so basically A and not A. So if something basically doesn't boil down to if it can't be reduced to a contradiction, then it is said to be logically possible. Or if it doesn't entail a contradiction, because if you can derive a contradiction from it, then you could then that is also not logically possible. So logically necessary truths are like the laws of logic, mathematical truths and stuff like that. Things that must be, things that their absence would entail some kind of a logical contradiction. And a logical impossibility is just simply the opposite of a logical possibility, which is basically something that is or entails a logical contradiction.
Okay, so a proposition is like a truth bearer, some sort of, maybe in common language we say a statement. So a statement that could be true or false. That statement, that proposition could be logically possible, logically impossible, or logically necessary. Yeah. And so I don't know if you could give me an example of a logical possible proposition, Abdul. Some crazy one.
There is a pink elephant. There's a pink elephant playing video games behind the moon.
Okay. Right. So that's a
That's
really
logic-
good.
that's-
My favorite proposition. My favorite.
That's logically possible, apparently.
So logically possible. So in that context, when you say something's logically possible, you're not saying it's probable or plausible.
No, yeah. So the most ridiculous thing in the world can be logically possible. It just isn't or does not entail a logical contradiction.
Yeah. Like
Okay.
another one would be the existence of the universe popped into existence 5 minutes ago. It's one of my
Right, so
favorite
it's-
ones.
yeah.
It is
So it's
technically possible with all of the history, all your memories, all of that was created 5 minutes ago. But you could also say 6 minutes, 7 minutes, etc.
So yes, so a logical proposition is any proposition that does not entail a contradiction. Yeah, so it's logically possible. It doesn't mean it's true. Yes, I think that's really important. It just means it's a possibility. It doesn't entail a contradiction. So Jake, let's talk about it, man. What's a logical impossibility? What does that actually mean?
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to unmute my mic there. Yeah, so I think the example that Abdul gave and also Yusuf was good about logical possibility, because I think when you contrast it with what I'm about to say, I hope people will understand it, because people are saying, well, how is that even logically possible? It sounds so bizarre. It doesn't make any sense. And well, yeah, it does. None of us really think that that exists, right? And we don't think that it's probable at all. But when you're saying that something is logically impossible, what you're basically saying is that the sentence or the phrase or the claim, whatever is being made, it literally doesn't have meaning. It doesn't even really make any sense. And so you can just by the words alone derive an internal contradiction within it. That's what makes something impossible. So an example of this would be like a married bachelor, right? And so we all know what it means to be married. We all know what it means to be a bachelor. A bachelor is an unmarried man. And so when you say that there exists a married bachelor, you're literally saying a married, unmarried man. Well, that's a contradiction, because now the man is both married and he's unmarried. He's not married. And so within that phrase itself, there's a contradiction. Now, I hope people can see the difference between that and the example of, I think Abdu said, an elephant playing video games behind the moon. There's a difference between that, because although it sounds so bizarre, there's nothing within the wording itself that renders the sentence or the proposition meaningless or self-contradictory. Whereas with the married bachelor, it is an internal contradiction. Same thing would be like for a square circle, right? So we all know what a circle is. We all know what a square is. To say that there's this thing which is both a square and a circle simultaneously, and let's just give it the name of a square circle, not a circle which is squared or a square which is made into a circle, that is certainly possible. But something that is simultaneously a circle, right, and also a square which has 4 angles and a circle which doesn't have it, to say that you can have a square circle is contradictory, right? And so these are some examples, some basic examples for the audience. I don't want to pile on too many, but when we talk about logical impossibility, we're literally saying that the phrase or the sentence is contradictory such that it has no meaning. You can't even really imagine of it. You can't even conceive of it in any meaningful way. And something like a married bachelor or square circle would fit the bill. Now, practically speaking, I'll give an example. If somebody comes up to you and says, well, hey, you know what, Brother Sharif, I've got this new invention for you. I've got a square circle in my back pocket. I'm going to pull it out and I'm going to show you. Well, already before he's even pulling it out, you're imagining, what is this guy on about? There's something wrong with him. There's not even a possibility. There's not even a remote possibility that he could have a square circle in his back pocket, right? Now, you might get a similar reaction with the elephant on the moon thing, but it's not in the same realm, because at least the statement itself is meaningful. So I don't want to get too far into the weeds, but I hope that's simple enough.
Yeah,
as an
Jake,
example.
could you just like comment on this, because I think it's related. This comment right here, I think it's related to this. Like he's using logical in a different way. So
yeah. So we actually did a whole stream on this, guys, and what we're gonna do, I think if we have time, we're gonna try to bring up examples based on conversations that we've had on tap in the past, and we're gonna say, okay, here's an example of what a contradiction is. Here's an example of what a contradiction is not, and try to show the difference. So we're going to, I think, try to reference previous conversations that we had before we let guests on. But one of the streams that we did an entire stream on miracles and whether or not miracles are contradictory. Are they illogical, I think was the exact phrase. I would have to. So, Yusuf, if you could actually pull it up and post it in the chat for the fellow who asked that question. I would suggest watching that for a more detailed discussion on miracles and whether or not they're illogical. So without going into too much detail with that, no, the idea of the moon being split or a miracle is not illogical. It might be highly improbable or seems so astonishing, and I think even as Muslims we would agree with that, because it doesn't fall under the natural order of things. You don't see these type of things happening every day, so to speak, but there's nothing illogical about it in the sense that when we talk about in terms of it's strictly being a contradiction, the moon being split in half, there's nothing contradictory about that, in the same way that you can derive a contradiction from the statement that there is a square circle or that there is a married bachelor. Within the meaning of the words itself, you can derive a contradiction internally such that the statement becomes meaningless. Now, when I say that the moon was split in two, you're like, whoa, that seems a bit bizarre. And yeah, I'm with you there. But there's nothing within that statement itself that is contradictory. You could not derive a contradiction from that wording alone in the same way that you could with a married bachelor or a squared circle. And so I think if people want a fuller defense of how miracles are not actually logical contradictions, I think you should watch that stream.
I think the problem... Sorry, go on, Yusuf, go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say, and this gentleman here, he could probably just zoom straight to the beginning of this video and then just start from the beginning, because I think we explained pretty well why this just shows a basic lack of misunderstanding with regards to what like something being illogical is. So like Jake was saying, things might sound bizarre, but we've got examples of things sounding bizarre and sounding strange all the time. And the bizarreness of them is not reason enough to dismiss them. The results, for example, from the double slit experiment are very bizarre. They're very weird. But, you know, it doesn't mean that the results don't occur simply because they're strange or simply because they act counterintuitively. The scientist says to you that, you know, a particle is in a superposition. You know, that sounds very bizarre, but just pointing out that something is strange is not enough to be able to dismiss it. So there are conditions in which something can be possible. So, for example, this idea of an elephant playing on a computer game behind the moon, like you can envisage conditions in which that becomes possible. Like it is possible that we can, for example, go into space. We can maybe fire an elephant over there, and you know there could have been some secret mission.
You're giving too much details.
No.
I know what you mean.
It's important. But
yeah.
basically, there are possibilities. There are conditions in which these things can occur, and allow these sort of things to happen within the statements themselves. So you can have atomic statements and compound statements. So atomic statement is just one claim, like. You know, this is made of metal. This is metal. A compound statement is like this is, and then you have like a conjunction, like and or an or something, and then another statement with it. And contradictions arise generally out of compound statements with conflicting elements within them. So you'll have proposition A at one part of the statement, and then proposition not A in the other, in such a way that you're making them a conjunction. So you're saying they are both the case at the same time. And that's where they sort of implode and become meaningless, because you're not really communicating anything, like the examples Jake gave. So the married bachelor, the reason that this is inherently illogical is because married is the negation of unmarried. They are complete. They are the opposites of each other. And so you can't have them in conjunction. You can't say that something is A and not A simultaneously. Now, there is nothing like that in the statement, and the moon was split in two. You don't have two elements that are the negation of each other or that come into conflict. The example of the squared circle. So what, by definition, what makes a square a square? By definition, a square is something that has four sides and has four angles that add up to 360 degrees. That is what makes a square a square. Now, by definition, a circle is not that at all. And so if the conditions which make a circle cannot be the case without the conditions that make a square, then you can't have these at the same time. You can't say that something is a square and a circle simultaneously, because by definition, what makes them, it's not possible to have them simultaneously. You don't have that in the statement that the moon was split in two.
Or that there's a pink elephant behind the moon.
Yeah. Or that there's a pink. The statement in and of itself, remember, we're not talking about the truthfulness of the statements at this point. We're talking about whether or not there is any validity in certain statements, whether it is possible to use them. And obviously, then you can build arguments with statements that are valid statements, that there's no inner conflict within the statements itself. They can be a part of an argument, and then you can build on that. You find out whether it's valid, and then you assess each statement as to whether it's true. Now, the truthfulness is not the same as talking about its logical coherency. So you can say that it's not true that the moon was split in two. Yeah, and this is a separate claim. This isn't to say that it's illogical or not, because it is logically possible. What you can then talk about is maybe whether or not the argument that contains such a proposition is faulty. But that does not say that the statement itself is incoherent.
Yeah, I think the problem is that when people use the word logic, illogical, you're being, illogical here, they're using it in a very loose, colloquial way. And what we try to do is we try to say, no, we need to use it very precisely. Because if you're not using it precisely, then you're going to talk past each other. So you need to understand what the particular definition is. And, it's interesting because Jake talked about a meaningless statement. And, Jake, whenever he talks to Trinitarians and he asks them about the is of identity or is of predication, and the person says, I think one guy recently said it's both. And Jake said, that's literally a meaningless statement. Now,
that one set me off.
Now, sometimes people, when they hear that term meaningless statement, they think Jake is using it in a hyperbolic way. He's just trying to emphasize a point. But Jake is using it in a very strictly definitional way. He's saying that the sentence you're making literally carries no value of meaning. That's the issue. That's what we say when we say it's a logical impossibility. The statement that's carried within a logical impossible proposition carries no meaning whatsoever. It's not like I can imagine the meaning. I can't even imagine it as a meaning, as a meaning itself. And similarly, if you have two propositions, one is an affirmation, and the second proposition is a negation of the first, then it results in this thing, which is it becomes meaningless to us as human beings. It's illogical. And I think this is why it's also important to people who appeal to mystery. When you point out a logical contradiction within their belief, they can't appeal to mystery at this moment in time, because you're basically saying that your proposition that you're trying to convey is meaningless. It has no meaning. And so now if you say it's a mystery, why it has no meaning, it literally means you're not calling to anything. Yeah, you're not calling to anything which is meaningful. Yeah. So, these are technical points. And so I think the audience needs to really appreciate this point. But I want to just really quickly, because we want to give some examples. But one final question to Abdul. is what's the difference between a logical impossibility and a metaphysical impossibility, or are they the same thing?
No, they're not they're not the same thing. So a logical possibility is basically it's broader than a metaphysical possibility or impossibility, depending on what scope of modality you have in mind. But the idea is that something that is logically possible, like for example the pink elephant playing video games behind the moon, doesn't necessitate that it's metaphysically possible. And metaphysically possible means possible in the actual world, in the sense that there is a genuine actual metaphysical possibility for this thing to occur. So by according to a lot of people, just depends sometimes, not every logical possibility is always a metaphysical possibility. If you hold to some sort of conceivability theory in conceivability approach to modality, and you think that every logically possible statement or proposition or thing is actually metaphysically possible, that's a different story. But there is a serious distinction between them, in the sense that not everything that is just logically possible has to have an actual metaphysical possibility in the real world.
So the way I sort of understand it is that a metaphysical possibility or metaphysical impossibility is that you have certain commitments, certain axioms or prior commitments that you hold, and then based upon those axioms and prior commitments, you then start to assess a logical possible statement within that paradigm. So a logical possible statement is just saying a sentence that carries a meaning. Yeah, the actual sentence or the proposition carries a meaning. A metaphysical impossibility is saying, okay, the sentence carries a meaning. That's bare minimum. Yeah, that doesn't tell me whether it actually exists. Now I have certain prior commitments. I have certain understandings, certain principles that I understand to be correct or true, that I act and develop ideas by. Based on that, I'm going to look at, whether this possible meaningful statement can be actualized. Is that correct, Abdul?
Yeah, that's true. And not just whether it is actualized. I think it's whether it can be actualized, whether there is a genuine metaphysical possibility for it to act. It doesn't have to be real, but when you make statements about metaphysical modality, what you're saying is that you're making statements about what actually can be. So an example I think I've heard Jake or maybe Hatim use before was a ball being all red and all blue at the same time in the same way. Now, I think this is a bit of a technicality, because what some people want to say is that that's a metaphysical possibility, but it's not a logical impossibility. Now, of course, you'd have to agree, because if you reduce the statement, the ball is red and the ball is blue, like, you take those, like, what we call in logic simple statements, and you simplify them, and using symbolic logic, you're not going to come out with any kind of contradiction, because there's nothing about those symbols that really tells you what red is and what blue is, right? But I mean, that's just a bit of a technicality, because if we can say, based on our experience, which again, that's going to involve some sort of empirical investigation. So once we have the experience that blue is not red, then here you'd have you can basically derive a contradiction from the statement that the ball is blue all over and red all over, by saying that blue equals not red, so the ball is red and not red. So it's a bit of a technicality sometimes, but generally speaking, the idea is that logical possibilities really deal with the rules of logic and inference and how we understand contradictions. And metaphysical possibility is a bit of a narrower modal scope than that, because we want to talk about what's actual or what's actually possible.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know if we want to go on to some of the clips.
Yeah, we will. I just want to give one example of a common fallacy in reasoning, which is known as affirming the consequent. So in logic, you have basically, if P then Q, P therefore Q. That's the standard. But in this type of reasoning, what people do is they say, well, if P then Q, Q therefore P. And I'm going to break it down. Just one simple example would be like somebody saying, well, if it is raining, then the street is wet. The street is wet, therefore it is raining. Well, it doesn't necessarily follow. I mean, yeah, if it is raining, then the street is wet, but just because it's wet doesn't mean that it's raining. And how you can understand that is by understanding that, well, there are other possibilities in which the street could be wet and yet it's not raining. So you can think of it as, well, there could be kids playing outside. One of them turned the hose on and they just started, rinsing the whole street. Or they could have been having a balloon fight and the street got wet. Could have been that a truck went by with some type of liquid, maybe been water in it and tipped over and the whole street got wet. So there are other possibilities in which that condition could be met without that antecedent clause happening. And so the point is, this is a very common feature in reasoning. It's one of the most common mistakes that people make. They say, oh, well, if this happens, then this will happen. The latter thing, which is called the consequent, happened. Therefore, the other thing necessarily happened. That's wrong. That's an invalid way of reasoning from a premise to a conclusion. So I just wanted to point out that one common mistake that people make, because I also see that quite frequently in discussions with people. They violate, or they sort of are victim to this fallacy, which is called affirming the consequent. So I hope that helps out somewhat.
Cool.
Yeah, I've got the clips ready. Unless you guys had any further comment. So let me just share the screen here. 1 second.
So I think we want to go to a few of the discussions that we've had, and I think just there's only a few minutes. I think we can double speed it as well. And I think it's good because it really highlights this issue that we're talking about, especially when Abdul asks questions.
Yeah. So the first one we're going to look at is one with Pinecreek, also known as Mr. Icky. Yes, I nicknamed him, so I'll take credit for that, guys.
He also did demand to be referred to as that as well in one of his comments.
He doesn't mind. So here's a short clip from him, and the point of this is to try to give you examples of what we're saying isn't actually a contradiction, at least in this case anyway, and then maybe some examples of what would be. So here we go with Mr. Pinecreek. I'm going to start it off at 1.5, and if you think I should go faster, Sharif, just let me know.
Pinecreek, can you make the argument? Sorry, I don't mean to.
Yeah.
So can you just make the argument right now in premise conclusion form?
Well, I'll try. So premise 1 would be God doesn't like sin. He doesn't like disbelief. Premise 2 would be something like God knows the future with certainty. He's never surprised. I think both of these things, both these premises, you guys agree with. Premise 3. It would be that he knows with certainty some will disbelieve and end up in hell. Conclusion, Allah was okay with some people disbelieving and going to hell.
So that conclusion that Allah was okay with people disbelieving and going to hell.
Just for the.
Do you want to say something?
Yeah, I was just saying, I think we shouldn't do it 2 times speed for the benefit of the.
This isn't 2 times. This is 1.5. You think it's too fast?
Yeah, I think it's actually fine. I think it's.
Yeah, I think it's fine. It's fine.
Okay. Did you want to comment, Yusuf, or you just stopped for that?
No, I was just thinking in terms of those watching this that are trying to figure out logical contradictions. It'd probably be better just to have it normal speed, just because some people get thrown off even at 1.5. I'm cool with 2 times, but I know people complain about putting the speed up a lot.
Okay. What I'll do is I'll put it at 1.25.
Meet me halfway.
Yeah, I'm going to meet you guys halfway. All right. That's an executive decision. Okay, here we go.
Right. Are you saying that contradicts?
All I'm saying is
God
make you guys feel icky.
Did dislike. It's not okay. So you're arguing from emotion here because it's not making me feel icky. Okay.
You are.
So here's the issue. Here's the issue, Pinecreek.
Well, he just said he's arguing from emotion.
What you want to say is that this world that God actualized is not ideal in the sense that there is evil in it and people will be tortured in hell for an eternity. Therefore, therefore it is something that is not the best of all possible world, or it's not something that's morally good or justified, right? But let me ask you a question: what are your views on morality? What's your underlying ethical theory that
I want you
makes
to assume that I
judge-
have none.
How can I understand what you mean by good and evil?
I'm using your definitions.
What is my definition of good and evil?
Should we pause it there? I think that's I think
that's it. Yeah. So
that's the clip.
yeah.
Go on, Jake. Yeah.
No, I was just gonna say, that was the point where you had me to stop. So at the end there, you'll see Abdul was pressing him on, well, what's your standard? And he claims, well, he's using our standard. But what you'll actually find out is he's not using our standard, because if he was using our standard to make the argument, well, then the whole thing falls apart, because obviously we don't believe the premise of what he was saying, that, well, if God knows that some people will reject him basically and go to hell, then he shouldn't create, was basically kind of the argument. And we're saying, no, we don't believe in that. So he wasn't going based on our presuppositions. And even then, he wasn't reducing our position to a contradiction. But go ahead if you guys want to comment.
I was going to, so I was going to bring Abdul into this, because Abdurrahman, he asked him the question, okay, lay out your argument. What is your argument against it? Yeah. And so I can't remember the exact premises that he gives. He sort of says, God created the world. It's got disbelief in it. People are going to go to hell. And he goes, therefore, people are going to go to hell. And so it's like, you know,
it wasn't even a proper. I think it was just premises without a conclusion. If I'm
it's just one point.
It's just a bunch of points. But I think what he's trying to derive from it. I think what he was trying to derive a contradiction from the idea that God does not like sin, but God allows sin. But you see, like syntactically, right? If you look at these two statements, if you want to reduce them to simple sentences, right? And where's the contradiction? So God does not like sin. God allowed sin, right? Forget about all the other discussions on the problem of evil and what that entails on all that stuff. If you understand what a contradiction is, you'll realize that that's not a contradiction. You still, if you want to, derive an actual contradiction from God allowing for sin to exist, then you have to do a bit more work. Something like God likes sin and God does not like sin, right? Yeah. So,
I just want to add as well. So a good way of just showing that something isn't, for example, a contradiction in this case, would be to give a counterexample. So are there any cases where someone allows something that they don't like? Yeah, of course. Like, for example, people don't like pain, but they'll put up with it for other purposes. So, for example, people might go to the gym because they want to look buff, or whatever it is that they want to do, or whatever aim they're trying to achieve from going to the gym. Despite not liking pain, they will put up with it because of something. So, and that's just one example. If you can give a counterexample that shows where these two elements that you say shouldn't coincide, or you can't have these in a statement in a conjunction that is both of them and affirming both of them simultaneously, then it shouldn't be the case that there would be any counterexamples. You wouldn't be able to come up with any at all, and that would show. That
I mean, in that case, though, like a better syllogism he could have come up with, would be like, God cannot or does not allow things that he does not like. God does not like sin, therefore God cannot or does not allow sin. I mean, at least in terms of validity, give me something valid to work with. Then we can start questioning the premises. But in this case, it was all over the place, because there's nothing to work with, in the sense that you couldn't derive a conclusion from the premises he was providing. So and he, at the end of the day, he admitted it was an argument from emotion. So I guess the whole logic.
And I think it's the point here is this: is for us to address an argument, we have to be presented with an argument. I think that's the issue. So if they're not presenting an argument, this is why constantly we'll always ask the question, what's the actual point? What are you trying to get at? Are you trying to say it's an internal critique? Is it a contradiction? What's your point? If they're not presenting an argument, then there's nothing for us to deal with. There's nothing for us to address, really. And just one final point before we move on to the next clip of Pinecreek is, when somebody says something is a logical contradiction, or a logical impossibility, the burden of proof now shifts to them. They are now in a position to demonstrate that it is impossible. So the burden of proof shifts slightly. So when people say your position is internally contradictory, the Islamic position is internally contradictory, he's now in a position to have to substantiate that position. We don't have to substantiate the position. Say no, it's not a logical contradiction. We have to say no. You now have to prove it. Okay, give me an argument. And from that argument, now we can investigate whether it does entail a logical contradiction.
Can I say something about that? Because I mean, sometimes it gets really frustrating, and I think many, at least Sharif and Jake, they know who I'm talking about when I mention like there are people who we've been speaking to for quite a while about logic and logical contradictions. And when they try to present us with logical contradictions in our worldview, they come up with the most ridiculous things. Like, for example, the moon splitting, and also a couple of days ago, someone brought up two verses that he said, like, in the Quran it's contradictory: man being created from sperm and man being created from dust. Now, the reason this is so ridiculous is because, you see, Jake, for example, right, when he tries to address the logical problem of the Trinity, he lays it out, all the premises and what the apparent problem is. And then he doesn't say, therefore, your belief in the Trinity is an actual contradiction. What he says is that there seems to be a problem here. And then he starts asking you questions. In what way are you saying, in what way are the is God statements, being made? Are they statements of predication or statements of identity? And he takes you through a line of reasoning where you get to do a lot of explaining. You get to explain what you mean by the words you're saying. And from there, we can say whether it entails a contradiction. And in many cases, it does not. So, like, for example, there, just on the surface of it, William Lane Craig's partialism doesn't seem to be contradictory in the same way, other forms of Trinitarianism are. And so in Jake's discussions and generally in our discussions with Christians, that's what we do. We allow them that space in the sense that we're saying there's an apparent problem. There seems to be a problem here. Now, what do you mean by these words? And does it necessitate a contradiction? And that's really the way it should be done. It shouldn't be that, this look, like in the case of from sperm and from dust. Well, you see, a contradiction needs to be A and not A at the same time in the same way. Like, it needs to be something you're making. You're saying that a statement is both true and false at the same time in the same way. This is very far from that. You need to do a lot more work. You need to ask what people mean by the words they're using in order to basically come to the conclusion that it is a contradictory, incoherent position.
Yeah. William Lane Craig's model is heretical, and it has other problems. But in terms of the actual basic formulation, there is no internal contradiction.
Yeah, I would just qualify and say that I don't think that an orthodox doctrine of the Trinity could be coherent. So I would probably say that. But
should we go to 35-42?
But again, sorry, before you go, so Jake, would you agree? Because you see, that's kind of the point, that just because it can be coherent, right, it can still be highly unreasonable and implausible. So you can have a coherent model of God's, like the partialist model, and it can have serious problems. Even if we're going to put contradiction aside, it doesn't necessitate that it's true. Just like the pink elephant example, there's no incoherence there. It doesn't mean that it's possible, right?
Yeah, I think maybe we missed out on something important, or maybe we said it, but anyway, because I was trying to get the links up. But something being coherent doesn't entail that it's true, but in order for it to be true, it must be coherent. So it's a minimum standard of truth, but it doesn't necessitate that the concept or the proposition or the idea being put forward is true. But for anything to even be possibly true, it has to be coherent. So it's a minimum standard of truth. It's a necessary criteria, but not necessarily a sufficient one, right? And so I think that's also something that people need to keep in mind. But I think in the interest of time, we ought to go into the next clip. What do you say?
Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, so Sharif, you're mentioning the next one is at 35, right? Okay.
Yeah,
just
35-42.
Yeah, let me just pull that up. So, all right, here we go. Share the screen again. And, okay.
So Islam says this. This is what Islam says. Islam says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the world, created heaven and hell, and created human beings with free will to the ability to choose, and then said to human beings that if you freely
I
choose,
understand all that.
if you freely choose to have belief in good actions, you go to paradise. If you freely choose to commit sin and disbelief, you go to hellfire. Yeah. Now, on that premise, that's why I asked you a very specific question. On that premise, what is a logical contradiction, or is it just an appeal to emotion?
There's no logical contradiction at all.
Okay.
If you guys believe that Allah wants people to go to hell.
No, but what did I just say here? I said God created human beings with
Right.
free will. He created the universe, or a creation with heaven and hell. Yeah.
Right.
And God legislated that.
You're
Notice what he said. There is no contradiction. But anyway.
focusing on.
people,
I
and that
understand
God
all that.
legislated, that therefore whoever commits disbelief, will be assigned to hellfire,
Right.
and who has belief in righteous actions will go to
Right.
paradise.
You want to focus on the free will of humans, and I want to focus on the free will of Allah. That's the point.
Right. So
So
explain,
Pinecreek, God wants-
link the
God-
two. Yeah, link the two. Just sorry, Abdul, link
Yeah,
the two together. So you're saying that God could have created a universe in which
No.
human beings only choose to go to paradise.
No, I'm not even saying that. I'm saying
Oh.
Allah had two choices: create or not create. So let's assume if He creates, it would have to be exactly what you guys are describing. That's one option. The other option
Right.
is don't create anything.
Okay.
Those
So
are
which
two
one?
options.
And then
And so if you're a Muslim and you say, "Oh no, Allah is okay," I mean, I know that language is a problem. Allah is okay with it, or He desires it, or He wanted to, but He's not surprised by what happens with His creation, and so He created, knowing exactly what would happen. That some people would end up in hell, and you know what? He created anyhow.
yeah,
That's all I'm saying.
So
There's no contradiction.
So where's the contradiction? Then? There is no
So,
contradiction.
so my goal,
We're
I
spinning
think,
in circles, guys.
No, but at Pinecreek, your goal should be this. Your goal should be to be epistemically justified and consistent with the way you're trying to build an argument. Building an argument just appealing to emotion is not sincere, honest. Well, you can say sincere and honest in one perspective, but it's not epistemically justified to build an argument just to appeal to emotions, because we can make any argument based upon emotions. It then becomes my emotions versus somebody else's emotions. You want to have, you want to be able to
Sharif, the
justify
other-
based on reason and arguments, isn't it?
Yeah, but notice Pinecreek's face here. Sorry, I'm gonna keep playing, but just notice him.
Zoom in.
I mean,
zoom in on the face.
he knows what he's doing. Zoom
zoom
in.
in.
How do I do that, brother? That's above my pay grade. How do I zoom in?
I don't know. Do you not pinch zoom on your laptop? You got a Mac. haven't you?
Okay, there. That's how it goes.
Yeah, yeah.
Sharif, the other problem is that you said you were doing an internal critique, but then it
Now, so I ought to not do that because then I'm probably going to screw things up. Anyway, he's laughing when Sharif is pointing out, like, come on, man, you're appealing to emotions here. And he sort of just admits it. But I think we ought to keep playing it. Go ahead, Sharif.
Yeah, I think that's it, actually. I think that's the, I think that's the.
No, there's
What is
you've got here. You've got like 3.5 more minutes left of this.
Oh,
clip.
is it? Oh, okay then. Go on, Karen.
If I recall as well, before you do, like I remember Pinecreek saying something basically along the lines of, "Oh, they keep appealing to this in the same way, at the same time thing."
Yeah.
To get out of a contradiction. And it's like, that's exactly what a contradiction is. Like, you can't just say, oh, they're trying to appeal to the specific definition of what a contradiction is in order to get away from what you claim is a contradiction, is the issue. He just wants to say it. And the issue is that it's not in the same way, in the same sense. And he tries to oversimplify it and reduce it. And I'm guessing this is what's maybe going to happen in this next clip, but I can't recall the timestamps exactly. But.
Okay, here we go.
found up being an external critique because of your fundamental presupposition of saying, well, surely anybody would agree that this world is not as good as this other world.
No, I just talked about one little thing. I said, anybody here who wants to spend eternity in hell, raise your hand. And Abdul even admitted earlier, he agreed. Okay, I know what you mean.
No, we didn't. We never said.
No.
No, we never said. See, you're confusing the difference between an individual actually wanting to spend eternity in hell versus a world in which hell exists. The two aren't the same, and for you to act as if they are the same is a problem.
The bottom line is this: there would be no disbelief, no sin, no pain, no suffering, no hell, people in hell if Allah never created. And that's something everyone here agrees with.
And
Yeah,
so what?
here's your
And
thesis
what's the
statement, Pinecreek.
conclusion?
The conclusion
What's the-
is
what's
that
the
you
conclusion?
have a choice to worship a God or not. That's the conclusion.
Yeah, you do have a choice. And so what?
And so, or be open to the idea that maybe the God you believe in doesn't exist. Maybe there is a God, but not the one you believe in, because I guarantee you, I guarantee this is one claim I'll make. I'll guarantee that there's some Muslims listening here who are listening to me.
I'm waiting for your argument, Pinecreek. How does that argument that you just presented result in God does not exist or your God does not exist?
No, I'm not. If your God exists, then this is what I was going to say. I guarantee you, some Muslims who might be, the weak type, wavering on the fence, are going to hear what we're discussing and say, you know what, that Pinecreek kind of makes sense.
It's so frustrating.
Pinecreek, please don't use that language. Yeah.
Is that
Pinecreek, I
bad?
don't. Yeah, it is. Yeah. Pinecreek, what I don't understand is where's your argument?
He doesn't have one. He doesn't have
Where's
one.
your argument? Where
My
is your
argument is
you
Allah wants,
said,
Allah doesn't want.
Hold on.
There it is. There it is. Pause.
Again,
Pause.
you're
So he says the contradiction is Allah wants, Allah doesn't want, and he's reducing it to that, and he's not explaining what it is that Allah wants, because when you start basically expanding it and explaining what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't want and what he does want, then there isn't a contradiction. And this is very important in order to explain the contradiction, and he's leaving crucial information out in order to make it sound like it is. So like he just reduced it then to Allah wants, Allah doesn't want. When you say it like that, it may be, but I've given a counter example already where there are cases where you can want something and not want something else and still allow the thing that you don't want to occur anyway. There is no necessary contradiction, and he can only draw it out by making these ridiculous oversimplifications and neglecting to mention the conditions which make it not a contradiction. That is, that it has to be let me pull up the actual definition of a contradiction so we can just read it. A contradiction a logical contradiction is a conjunction of a statement S and its denial not S. Cannot be true in the same sense at the same time. So the two statements cannot be true in the same sense at the same time. When we're talking about what Allah wants and what he doesn't want in this particular case, it's not in the same sense and it's not at the same time. So for example, we can talk about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't want you to disobey. That he wants you to obey his laws, but he also he wants justice. And so he does, for example, want to send people who deserve to go to hell. He can want that. That's fine. He can want justice. He can desire to send people to hell who deserve to go there. But he can also want and desire for you to have not done that. But if you do that, then you get the consequences. There's no contradiction here at all. It's a completely coherent story. And he has to oversimplify it to make an apparent contradiction pop in. But the only way he does that is by completely removing all of the information that shows that it's not a contradiction, and then complaining about us, using the definition of what a contradiction is and pointing out, well, this is important. And then he says, oh, they throw this in there to wiggle out of it. So no, you're throwing things out to wiggle in.
He's basically equivocating on the word because it's being used in two different senses. But in the interest of time, guys, because we've got two more clips to get to, Sharif, do you mind if I go to Ridvan next? Because I think Pinecreek.
Do you want to go? Yeah, well, just play that. Just one more. I think 30 seconds of Pinecreek one. We don't need to go to Ridvan's one. We'll go to Aron Ra after this. But yeah, just
okay. I mean, because the Ridvan's is literally only like a minute, so that won't hurt us.
Change it. You initially said your God does not exist because, and then you're about to give an explanation. Then you start saying, well, some Muslims might be wavering. Then you said Muslims might not be wavering. Now you're saying to me, God wants, God doesn't want. That's another. That's right. I've given you an answer. I've given you an answer a number of times, and you said, yeah, okay, that makes sense. It's not an internal critique. Then you said it's not a logical contradiction.
Yeah, I give you your
then you said it's not a logical contradiction. So what exactly is the argument? Do you understand where the frustration is?
The argument is Allah has free will, did not need to create, decided to create, knowing exactly what would happen, and it leads some people to hell.
Okay, so what's that? So sorry, hold on. What's that problem?
And his creation leaded to pain, evil, suffering, and some people going to hell.
What category? Is that a logical contradiction? Is it an evidential?
No, I would say that's a logical deduction of where the premises lead. That you believe in a God who created, knowing what will happen, was okay with it, whatever that means, and that led to people going to hell.
But what does that mean in terms of your argument against Islam and against God in general, or God, or the God that we believe?
All I'm pointing out is what you believe.
Yeah,
I'm pointing out what you believe.
But we as Muslims, we know what we believe. This is not a problem for us.
Maybe you guys do.
I think. No, I just want to say one thing. I just want to say.
We're gonna have to move on, guys. We're gonna have to move on.
Let me just say one.
Yeah, so I mean,
Yeah.
we got clear there that he didn't actually have a contradiction. Now you're just pointing out what we believe. Okay, thank you. I mean, have a nice day, sir.
And I think, Jake, also you mentioned in that clip as well, you said, okay, you are using your presuppositions. And I think that's the issue that a lot of people don't realize. They say that they're doing an internal critique, but what it is, they've got their own baggage that they're bringing into the discussion. They have certain notions about free will. They have maybe certain notions about God's justice. They have notions about morality. They're bringing that in and then saying yours is an internal contradiction, but they're not aware of their own assumptions that they're bringing into the argument.
Yeah.
Karen?
Okay, so I'm going to go to the next clip here, which is with Mr. Apostate Prophet. Here, it's only a minute and a half, so here we go.
Let me ask
And that's unjust?
Yeah, because this
No,
is
that is incoherent. I think that is completely
No,
incoherent.
because
It doesn't make sense. Actually punishing them for the way he created them, knowing exactly that this is what their nature in which he created them, what they would do, what would happen to them eventually. But let me ask
And
you.
that's unjust?
Yeah, because this
that is incoherent. I think that is completely incoherent.
because
It doesn't make sense.
So he's making a claim that it's incoherent. Now let's see if he actually substantiates that.
You're packaging it as if it's a logical contradiction, but it's sounding like
I'm saying it is incoherent. Look, it is incoherent.
Yeah,
I'm
By the way, for people who don't know, when you say it's incoherent and it's contradictory, they're not two different things, guys. They're referring in this context to the same thing. I know that there was a fellow that I spoke to that somehow thought there was a significant difference, but there actually isn't. But yeah, so Yusuf was right to press on that point, and I don't know what Apostate Prophet was thinking, but here we go.
saying that you said that. But the meat and potatoes of it is that it sounds more like a moral claim. It sounds more like you're saying that this.
It is not. It is not.
Then you need to show. Then you need to show what's the logical contradiction. You haven't shown that. There needs to be. You need to give premise 1, which is A. So the Quran or the Sunnah says A, and then premise 2, it also says B, and B is the negation of A. So B is not A.
It's a very rigid way to approach this.
That's what a contradiction is.
That's a rigid way to approach it.
Exactly.
He doesn't want that. He doesn't want an actual contradiction. He just wants to formulate his own argument and it not be contradictory. This is the type of people that unfortunately we're dealing with. We're discussing, and I don't know if it was purposeful, but it just so happens that 3 of the clips that we're going to play are from atheists. You have Mr. Icky, Mr. Irrelevant, and then Mr. Necessary Dean. I guess I'm just coming up with that on the spot. Aron Ra, which we'll see next. Yeah. And it's just we're not. I don't think it's intentional to pick on atheists because we say Christians do this, and even Muslims can be guilty of it as well. But it just so happened that this is what we came up with. But let me just finish. I think there's like 30 seconds left.
A contradiction is.
Yusuf, what I'm telling you is it is incoherent that Allah creates human beings.
Yep.
That He says that they are fully responsible for their actions, although He creates them with their capabilities and with their nature. And then He decides to punish them because they do not believe in Him.
He's struggling to try to do it on the spot.
Because they chose their free will, which He gave to them in the very beginning. He gave them free will, and they used this free will in the wrong way, which is why He will punish them forever. And this was their own fault.
Yes.
And they committed
That's not
evil.
a contradiction.
That's
not a contradiction.
So guys,
it's so funny.
Look at Sharif's face.
You can see it in AP's face as well as he's doing it.
He was struggling, brother.
He's starting to realize he can't offer.
You need to get
that
Sharif's face again. That was
Look at him. He's laughing, man. He's like, I'm loving this. And look at Yusuf as well. I mean, the same thing you've got going on.
Because I could just see what was going on in his head. Like you could see him sort of like starting to realize that he doesn't have what he suggested he has. And I'm just like,
I don't know what I was doing. I was probably looking at something else. I'm like,
You're giving him the death stare.
Yeah.
That's why he's getting nervous, I think, because you eyeballing
But
him.
Yeah,
I
that was
think
great.
it's a really good example because he on the one hand he's saying it's incoherent. Then we're saying, well, if you're saying it's incoherent, it has to be a logical contradiction. He said, no, it's just incoherent. Yeah. Then he's saying it's too rigid, having the criteria of logical contradiction. Then, you're saying, well, you're bringing in your presuppositions about what morality is. And you say, no, I'm not. Yeah. I'm doing internal critique. And yet the internal critique doesn't result in a logical contradiction. So it's just a good example in terms of people using words which have colloquial meanings but not understanding how it's used technically.
Yeah, and it's also really expressive of this huge frustration because it's these very same individuals that accuse theists of being irrational and they don't know anything they don't know anything about logic and this, that, and the other. And then when it comes to talking to people who have been trained in it and are familiar with the terminology and understand what it means, like they throw it out the window all of a sudden. It's like, actually trying to study these things is superfluous in some way, or like, it's really, really frustrating. It's one of my pet peeves.
That was a good one. I like that one. The last one is Mr. Necessary being Aron Ra. It's about 3 minutes. This is the last clip, and then we're going to go to audience. If you guys have any questions or comments, maybe points of clarification, whether or not this is a contradiction or it's not, things that you want to discuss, it'll be open to pretty much anybody. So, Yusuf, if you could post a link to the stream and pin it as a message while I'm playing this last clip, that would be appreciated, inshallah. Yeah. All right, so here we go.
You're looking for a way to disprove leprechauns, and the point that you're missing is that there's no reason to believe leprechauns.
That's two separate issues, though. There's two separate issues. One,
you need to have a reason to believe something.
Yeah, that's right. You need to have a reason to believe something. That's one thing. The second thing is having an understanding that something is impossible. Those are two separate issues.
Okay.
Now, what Abdul is explaining, he's saying that, look, if you just have an absence of evidence of X, it doesn't mean that X doesn't exist. So if I turn around and I say X does not exist, it means that I'm making a positive claim. Now, what Abdul said, he said that to make that positive claim that X does not exist, one of the ways would be to say, well, if X existed, I would see this evidence. If this evidence doesn't exist, therefore that justifies me saying that X does not exist. So he's asking the same question because you're in a position where you made a hard atheist claim that God does not exist.
What was my hard atheist claim?
So the hard atheism, that God does not exist. That is your position. Not that I don't believe in God because of lack of evidence. A soft atheist claim, but it's a hard atheist claim. So what Abdul is asking is a very specific question. He's saying, look, if you're making this claim that God does not exist, X does not exist, you have to either demonstrate that if God existed or X existed, we would see this evidence. Because we don't see this evidence, then I can discount God. So you have to say, you have to explain what Abdul's specific question was. You have to explain what that evidence is that we would expect, such that it doesn't exist, leading us to the conclusion that God doesn't exist.
Oh, I feel like repeating myself an awful lot. You're asking questions I've already answered, but
he's never answered it. And Sharif's question is, if you're going to take a hard atheist position and say that God does not exist, right? Which I think, if memory serves me correct, it might not be in this clip in particular, but I think Aron Ra does say that it's God existing is impossible. And I think that's kind of his position.
It's in the clip.
And it's actually in this clip. He's going to say it.
No. He didn't say it's impossible. He said it's not a possibility, which is apparently a different thing. Yeah.
Okay. Well, anyway, so it's impossible for God to exist. That's what it results in, him making that claim. And when you say that, you have to then reduce the claim of God's existence to a logical impossibility. And this is what do you call it? Sharif is trying to get him to see at this point, and Aron Ra's response is, well, I feel like I'm talking in circles. Well, you're not really talking at all, my brother. I'm sorry to tell you. But anyway, there's about a minute left, so let's go.
We don't have a possibility. We start with that.
Oh, we don't have a possibility. There you go.
And it's not just that we don't have a possibility. It's just that things are defined in reverse. I mean, you want to imagine that somehow the mind exists outside of the brain. There's no support for mind-body dualism whatsoever. But you're assuming that consciousness pre-exists matter, and there's no logical conclusion that would lead you to any of the gods that men have ever devised. When you look at the entirety of the cosmos, there's just no way to conclude that this thing cares that much about the skin on the tip of our penis if it created 11 gajillion galaxies and so forth. there's not a possibility for him to. How does he control whether your team wins the game or whether you find your keys? How does he manipulate matter? And believers will commonly tell me that that God helped them in matters like this. But in that case, God had to manipulate other people's minds, control other people's free will in order to manipulate everything to these ends. And they're just not thinking this through. So what I need is we need to show that there's a there, or we literally have nothing to talk about.
Yeah.
So, Sharif, I don't know if you want to listen to your response because you had it stopped there. I don't think it's needed, right?
No, it's not needed.
No. Yeah. So the point is that he didn't reduce the claim to a contradiction. He talked about whether or not God cares if you're circumcised, or which it says nothing about whether or not the belief is contradictory. He talked about the fact that there's no evidence. Well, him again just asserting that there's no evidence doesn't prove that the existence of God is impossible, which was Sharif and I think Abdul's point as well, that the absence of evidence isn't necessarily evidence of absence. You have to show, therefore, what Sharif was trying to say, that if God exists, necessarily we would find this. We don't find that, therefore necessarily God doesn't exist. I think that kind of either went over the poor fellow's head or he did understand it, but he just couldn't answer it. So went on about, I don't know, on this other thing talking about circumcision, which is, see, whether or not God cares if you're circumcised doesn't say anything about his existence. There's no contradiction there at all. So again, it's another case of someone like Aron Ra, who, subhanAllah, has a lot of people following him, and the guy doesn't even know what a contradiction is. So that was rather unfortunate. But if you guys have got any comments on that, that was the last clip. Sharif, Abdul.
No,
Anybody?
Abdul, I don't know if Abdul wants to jump in.
I just want to say something real quick because we could send in a link. The thing is, a lot of these.
Oh, Yusuf didn't do it. Did Yusuf send the link or no?
Yusuf, are you there?
Okay, I'm gonna do it then. I thought he was gonna take care of that for me.
Yeah, so I just want to say a lot of these guys that we talked to, like these three guys we just the clips we just showed. The problem is a lot of times they undermine the value of philosophy, and they say that we approach it from a different angle. But it's important to note that logic is like foundational to any kind of thought, to any kind of intellectual, practice. So whatever angle you approach it from, even if Aron Ra is going to talk about, evolution, or if AP is going to talk about, the immoral things that he finds in the Quran from his subjective perspective, then in doing that, you are going to use reasoning and logic in order to make your case. They speak as if, let's put logic and philosophy aside and talk about something else, as if we don't need logic and philosophy in order to talk about whatever it is you're going to talk about. So that's just the funny part, and it's strange that it comes from people with huge followings and huge influences.
Yep, I think we've got Thinker Man here waiting, so let me add him to the stream. Hey, how's it going?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you guys?
We're good.
Good. Abdul, by the way, if you could just talk to him, because I'm going to try to get the link pinned in there. I have to sign out of my YouTube account and do a whole thing. So go ahead.
Sure. Hey, Thinker Man, what's up? It's been a couple of days.
Yeah, it's always fun talking to you guys. So
yeah, same here.
My position used to be that there was no internal contradiction in Islam, but then I sort of delved deeper into the free will issue, and I've talked to this before with you as well. And at least for now, I'm convinced that that is an internal contradiction. And if you want to talk about
it. Sure. So I mean, based on, if you've been listening to what we've said, can you basically present your case for why there's a contradiction?
Okay, so the type of free will I'm saying is the one that includes moral responsibility. So I think it's important that we define what we mean by moral responsibility and free will, because if you have different definitions, like compatibilist definitions, then my argument just falls apart, because I'm talking mostly about libertarian free will. So by free will and moral responsibility, I mean that you could have you had the ability to do otherwise, and B, that you had ultimate control over over your choices.
Okay.
Okay, so so either your choices have a cause, then those causes are deterministic, in which case that's not libertarian free will, right? So so we have to add in indeterminacy, and that means the reason why you chose A rather than B has no cause, and if it has no cause, then the cause or explanation can't be that you chose it and made it such.
Can I just try to help you out here with the argument? Just let me know if this is what you're going to say at the end of the day. So in order to be more morally accountable, you must be able to choose your act. You must be able to choose what you're doing. We cannot choose our act, therefore we cannot be morally accountable. Is it something like that?
Yeah, you can't exert control in such a manner that you bring about one action rather than another.
Okay, so we discussed this a few times, but I think there's still a problem with you saying there's no cause for a free choice, because we agreed that we're not really talking about an acausal mechanism. We're talking about a primitive mechanism that on a libertarian view might be arbitrary, but it's not acausal. What you want to say, from me speaking to you, I mean, I understand your position, is that considering there is no explanation for why you would choose one choice over another on a libertarian view, therefore it is completely arbitrary, and whatever instance you're put in, it's just you and your luck, whatever choice that's going to be.
I don't even think he's saying that, Abdu. I think he's saying that the idea. I think he's saying the idea is contradictory.
What he's saying, because I spoke to him a few times, what he's saying is that because it is arbitrary, because I tried to dig this out of him.
But I don't think it is arbitrary. I wouldn't even use that word. I'm not comfortable with that.
I mean, I think at the end, I would use the word arbitrary for a true libertarian choice. I mean, the choice itself. I wouldn't say that there's no, platform there to do causal work to like ground the free choice. I think it's grounded, but I think the particular choice in terms
but arbitrary is, I'm looking it up, it's based on random choice or personal whim rather than any reason.
Yeah, that it has this negative connotation to it, but I don't mean it in that way. What I mean is that there's no external explanation that accounts for the specific choice. It is basically primitive is a better word. So the choice is primitive. And but
it's not without any reason.
Yeah, so yeah, again, we discussed this. So there are reasons that don't basically entail the choice. What he wants to say, which I want to grant him, is that the choice itself, whether it goes right or left, on a non-deterministic model, is going to be something that's, considering it's not entailed by the reasons, it's going to be something that's arbitrary, right? And what I want to agree with that. I want to say that the choice is primitive. I just think that that negative connotation he's coming with, that it being arbitrary means that it's just randomly happening, is not true, because it is primitive in the sense that it comes from the agent. What else do you want for moral accountability? Whatever the choice is going to be, whatever possible world you're looking at, on a libertarian view, the idea that an agent could have done otherwise does not mean that what the agent does is, he's compelled to do. It's actually quite the opposite, that whatever the agent does, that free act is always going to be from within the free agent, and it's always going to be primitive. I don't think it's this acausal mechanism that's just random and just relies on luck. So that's the first problem I have with your argument, that you're assuming that there needs to be this extra component. But I haven't seen you make a case for that, because considering the act comes from internally from the agent, I don't know what else you want for moral accountability. The second and bigger problem I have with your argument is, why should we accept your standard for what moral accountability is when you, you've spoken to me about this. You don't really have an objective standard for what it is. So I think the biggest point I mentioned to you was last time I spoke to you. I told you, listen, you can't have it both ways. If you're going to say that free will is an incoherent concept and we can't be held morally accountable because we can't be truly free in the sense that you want us to be, then you believe the same about God's free will. So if you believe the same about God's free will, then you can't hold God morally accountable for holding us morally accountable. So your argument falls apart. God can do whatever he wants in that sense, right? So I guess the crux of the issue here is, for me, let's assume I accept your understanding of libertarian free will. You would say it applies to God. So whatever will or free will God has, it is similarly, you can't expect to hold God morally accountable for his acts, but it seems you are by saying that, we shouldn't be accountable. He shouldn't hold us accountable. Do you see the inconsistency there?
Yeah, I do. And I remember you mentioned this point last time as well. And it was unfortunate. I think for some reason, either I went out or you went out and I wasn't able to respond. So I'll do it now because I have thought about what you said. So when you say that the choice comes from you, so who else is responsible? So that goes back to us defining free will and moral responsibility. I said that it has to be something that you could have done otherwise and that you had ultimate control over it. So let's say if I'm sitting and somewhere from my body, let's say my face starts sweating, okay? And I didn't choose to make it sweat, but it is from me that the sweat emerges. But I'm not morally responsible for the sweat emerging because I didn't have any control over whether my forehead starts to sweat or not. So, and the reason why it's a problem is because if it's truly arbitrary the way you say, then you did not exert any control over bringing it about in such a way. It's like you once you at a time I remember you said that it's something that happens to you. So that's my response to your first objection, and then the second one about God. I think
just sticking on the first one first, but I mean, how is it analogous? Because I think they're two completely different situations. So in the case of sweating, you're right. The whatever made you sweat is an external force that affected you and basically deterministically led to you sweating. But when we talk about free will, we're saying the opposite. We're saying it's an internal mechanism, and whatever. Mm-hmm. So if sweating is what it is, basically you chose to sweat. So whatever free act you do is an internal mechanism, and right now you're trying to make that analogous to an external force acting upon you. I don't see how you can do that.
So what I was saying, but what I meant was that whether it's something that internal to you or something external, the point is that you had no control in bringing it about. It's sort of like something that happened to you instead of something that you consciously reasoned and brought it about.
But we agree. So last time we spoke as well, we agreed that it's the agent. I mean, so this primitive free choice is the agent's choice. The free will is coming from the agent. It's not like free will is this separate thing, right? That produces these random choices, and I'm an agent that's not part of the free will, and it's just imposing its choices on me. I am that machine, right? I am making these choices. So it's primitive and it's internal. So I still see a problem with what you're saying.
I'll try to explain it one more time. Maybe I'm not doing it rightly. So let's say you're a machine who's built in such a manner that you randomly push out numbers, okay? Let's say some numbers are good and some numbers are bad, and you can't help but randomly push them out. You can never consciously, in a controlled fashion, bring about a certain number. They have to be arbitrary. So if a good number jumps out, then you won't really be morally responsible for it because all you can do is just randomly push out numbers. So similarly, we're a machine that randomly pushes out choices because I think we've agreed that their choices are arbitrary. Because if we say that there's a reason, then that would be an explanation and that would require further explanation. So I think we've agreed that.
No, we're not denying there's a reason, and I think that's what the good point Jake brought up. I mean, I'm not using arbitrary with that negative connotation that it comes with. I'm just saying that there's no
That's why I think you
explanation
shouldn't
that
use it.
entails it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with you. So because it does have a negative connotation, but then the reasons, there are reasons for choices, Thinkerman. It's just that the reasons don't entail the choice. Do you get the difference?
I get it, but I think you were correct in saying that ultimately why you made that choice, that itself does not have a reason. So let's say choice A has reasons 1, 2, 3, choice B has reasons 4, 5, 6, and now you have to decide what to do. Whether you choose A for reasons 1, 2, 3, or you choose B for reasons 4, 5, 6, that itself has no reason why you chose one or the other.
But that's what libertarian free will is. You're just talking about what libertarian free will is. You're not pointing out how it's contradictory or incoherent.
It's contradictory in the sense that the main thing is that why you chose A rather than B. And that thing
What's the contradiction?
You did it for no reason. You did it. It's sort of, you can say random, you can say chancy, you can say it's something.
No,
like
you can't. You don't. You can't.
It's
Those
primitive.
are all things.
Primitive is the word.
Yeah, those are all things that you're adding on that they're not part of libertarian free will. That's just your assessment.
So would you say that you had any control?
Yes, that's what libertarian free will is. It just means to have a reason to do something, but the reason not be necessitating, and say that I did this over this and I could have done this other thing. There's nothing incoherent about it.
There's there's the contradiction.
Where's the contradiction?
So if, like I said before, I'm not saying that there aren't reasons to do things. I'm saying that the why you pick one choice over another, that itself has no reason. If you say there's a reason,
what's incoherent about that? That's the question.
Okay, do we agree that that part has no reason? Are we in agreement there?
Yeah, because
No,
Jake, the incoherence is elsewhere for him. So I'm saying even if I do grant that, there's still no incoherence, because what you want to say is because of that, then you're not morally accountable. I just don't see how that follows.
No,
right?
but I disagree. He's saying the incoherence is right here before you even get to moral accountability. He's saying the very concept.
I don't think so. No, I think what he's trying to say is that because it's just random and chancy, you can't be accountable for what you do.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
But it's predicated on the idea that it is random and chancy. It's not.
Yeah. I mean, so those
That's
terms,
the point.
Tinkerman, I think I tried several times to tell you, let's not use the words random and chancy. So let's say that the choice is primitive, right? We're not saying that it's not grounded in an agent, but the problem is what you're saying, that it follows from, you know, the arbitrariness of free will, that the agent is not accountable. I just don't see how you can make that case, because you have to say that the choice is an internal primitive aspect of the agent. It's not from anywhere else. So if there is any accountability at all, where else is it going to come from? There's nothing external to the agent acting on the agent, making him do. He's acting himself. It's not randomly just and the machine example you gave isn't a very good one, because we know there's a mechanism that's just, you know, imposed on the machine. But we're thinking of an agent that has the ability to make these primitive, you know, who has this primitive faculty of free will and is able to make libertarian choices. If you're saying the incoherence is there, I don't see it. If you want to say that entails that he's not morally accountable, I can see more of a case for that, but I just don't see any logical entailment, especially when you don't really have an objective standard to tell us what it is to be morally accountable.
Right. Do you think that you can be in control of something that happens for no reason?
No.
Right. And so haven't we already admitted that you're choosing A rather than B has no reason?
My choosing A rather than B is an internal choice that I make.
It's within yourself.
Yeah.
And the reason why you make that choice, why A rather than B, it has to have no reason, because if it has a reason, then that must have a reason, and that must have a reason. And somewhere down the line, you have.
No.
Jake just explained that there's a reason, but it's not necessitating. I mean.
Yeah, we're spinning in circles. Thinker, you can make your final comment, and then we're gonna have to move on to the next person.
Okay, so I'll just make the final comment that I understand that there are reasons for choices, But what the thing that doesn't have an explanation is why did you choose A rather than B? So some people like say you have an ability to choose, but that ability to choose is consistent with you choosing B rather than A, not A rather than B. There has to be some explanation for why you chose A rather than B. And that if that point has no explanation, then the explanation can never be that you controlled it or you chose it, because we're already granting that it has no explanation. So you guys can counter it, and I think I'll take
Well, so what you're doing is you're trying to press a hard version of the PSR, but I'm just wondering if you would actually be consistent with that. And I I would actually argue that probably not.
right.
So, because what is your explanation for why the universe exists, or why anything at all exists?
So I don't think that's really even relevant.
It is relevant because what I'm saying is you're not consistent with your own thing, because when we actually get down to it, you're probably going to appeal to some type of bruteness.
Yeah, but no, I won't say that anybody is responsible for that brute fact existing.
No, because you're saying that in and of itself is incoherent.
No. I've never said that brute facts existing are incoherent. I'm saying somebody being responsible for a brute fact is incoherent, because a brute fact necessarily has no explanation.
No, you're not, because the person is in control of it. You're saying that he's not in control because there's not a further explanation.
Yeah, so something you can't be. So if he were in control of it and he chose it, then that's an explanation.
Yeah, him choosing it is the explanation. That's the point.
Yeah. And that would lead to further questions as to why did he choose that?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't lead to further questions. That's the point. It's primitive.
Yeah, Thinkerman, I think because we have to move on, but then I think that just the main idea is this. I don't think you do have a problem with brute contingencies, but then you have a problem with, first of all, your conception of libertarian free will, because you're trying to distinguish between the agent and the choice for some reason, as if the choice is this random thing that happens and it's imposed on the agent, but the agent is making the choice. The fact that you don't have some sort of necessitating explanation for the choice doesn't mean that it's not internal from within the agent. And also, I think the bigger issue with this is that if we're going to deny free will altogether, what I said earlier about, you're going to have to say the same thing about God and how he's not morally accountable. So him holding us morally accountable when he shouldn't, according to your standards, is not really a problem. So I guess you could think about that, and then we can discuss it, some other time.
And not only that, one last thing to add is that from an Islamic paradigm, it's not necessarily wedded to libertarian free will. So that's the other thing, that you're also assuming that Islam has an internal contradiction, but you can actually be a compatibilist and be a Muslim. So I just don't see on really any way that you slice it, even if you granted your entire argument, how it would be an internal contradiction.
So it would be an internal contradiction in that if you believe that you could not have done otherwise, and then God would be unjust. So
no, it wouldn't, because then again, you're no longer doing an internal critique. You're then therefore saying that you can't believe in a compatibilist understanding of free will and also be accountable, and that's a further argument that you would have to make. So anyway, we're gonna have to go, buddy. I'm sorry, we're gonna have to go to the next person because we've got 5 people waiting.
Man. We'll talk to you next time. Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
All right, we've got Sean here next. So, how you doing?
Hey, assalamu alaikum, guys.
Wa alaikum assalam. How's it going?
Good, man. I just wanted to say before I start, I really want to thank you guys for all the work that you do. I really appreciate everything, and I've learned so much from you guys.
Alhamdulillah. Appreciate that. Glad to have you here.
Thanks, man. So, my first question, I guess I would say is holding that, okay, if you are an atheist and you believe that the universe operates just physical stuff, chemistry and physics, and that's it, is it a contradiction to believe that and believe that you have free will?
I think we're probably all in agreement here, and I would say yes. Abdul, if you want to talk, you got to bring your mic down.
I wasn't talking though, but yeah.
I know, but you were before when Sean first came on, and you were muted.
Yeah. So I mean, I would agree it's a contradiction. Clearly, we'd have to do some work to show how it is, but I think yes.
Yeah, I would just say I think, Sean, that on a materialistic paradigm where you, like you said, that everything is just matter and motion, so to speak, seems like a deterministic worldview, or even if you think at the quantum level that there's some type of indeterminacy, it's still outside of human beings' control. And if that's the case, then yeah, it's very difficult to see how anybody would have free will.
Okay, and so based on that, would you say that a mechanism, like if we are just a mechanism, so to speak, can we be morally accountable? So, for example, if if a lightning bolt strikes a forest and creates a forest fire that causes a lot of harm, is that lightning bolt considered bad or evil?
No, of course not. Yeah, so I see what you're saying. Yeah, so it's like the previous guy that came on. If he thinks everything's deterministic, and this is something I mentioned to him, not in this conversation, but I spoke to him another time. I think it was on Clubhouse. How would you deal with moral accountability from a secularist paradigm? Why are we throwing certain people in prison, and for how long? And all of that type of stuff seems to cast doubt on the very idea of moral accountability. It just seems like, oh, well, we don't like these people because this happened, and so we're going to punish them. But they couldn't have done otherwise, just like you said. It's just like a plant growing a leaf is the same thing as somebody deciding to murder somebody from that perspective. And yeah, it just becomes very difficult to justify punishing people and moral accountability. So I would agree with you there.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, to get a good insight into what an atheist would say about this.
That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah, check out Sam Harris. So he wrote a book on free will. Basically, he holds the presuppositions you were mentioning, and he takes it to its logical conclusion, where he denies free will. He denies the self exists. So there's no individuality. This is the self is an illusion, and so like he just sort of runs it to the end, and that obviously, if you want to see what they think from the horse's mouth, there's that book in particular that's going to really give you an insight into the.
Yeah, I kind of know his opinion, and I don't really care for it. I'm curious, I like Graham Oppie quite a bit. I'm curious, do you guys know what he would think, or somebody along those lines? Because I don't know if Sam Harris is necessarily a philosopher, really.
No, he's not a good philosopher, but at least he's
kind of a figure.
So he holds
certain
assumptions.
Isn't he?
I haven't read enough on Graham Oppie, but I think he would be some type of compatibilist from what I understand.
Okay. So being an atheist doesn't necessarily mean that you think the whole universe and even human beings operate mechanically, then, I guess, eh?
Well, I think that even if I think he thinks at the quantum level there's some type of indeterminacy, but even that would be outside of your control. But I think what he would say or try to argue is, as long as you performing an action is due to yourself, that you out of your desire or wants, that you actually did it, and that you weren't compelled to do it by somebody else, like with a gun to your head, then he would consider you free enough to be morally accountable. Now, whether you agree with that or not is another story, but I think that's what he would say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think you guys answered my question. Before I go, I do want to ask you one more. It's not related to the subject.
Sure.
Faraz Zahabi, who I really like to listen to him, he offers a few not cosmological arguments, but other arguments.
Yeah.
And one of the arguments that he mentioned was he didn't really go into depth. So I'm wondering if you guys know this argument, and if you could mention it or talk about it a little bit, that'd be nice to hear. Okay. But he mentions how the extreme skeptic argument, where basically I don't believe anything I see. It could all be an illusion. It could be I don't trust anything I see or hear. The only thing I know is that I exist. the subject. And for a subject, I need to depend on an objective existence, and then he makes the argument that that's God. But I'm curious, do you guys know? Are you familiar with that argument? And can you go into a little bit more detail, because it was kind of vague when he mentioned it?
I think it's a form of transcendental argument. I've not heard that particular argument from Faraz Zahabi, so I'm not sure exactly. But from what you described, so he's saying that I exist. I believe that there's an objective reality, and I have to ground the objective reality in something, and that objective reality is God. Is that his argument?
Yeah, that's what it sounded like to me.
Yeah, so it's a form of transcendental argumentation. So for God, so there's various arguments that, can we as human beings objectively establish truth if all we are products of material agents, or materialism? So if our mind is just a product of the brain, and the brain is just matter in motion, non-conscious agents, how can we ground truth? How can we ground something which is objectively true? And so some philosophers are like externalist in their view of knowledge. They believe that actually knowledge is not something that we come up with, but rather knowledge is something that exists as an objective fact which has to be given to us. And so therefore he says, if we believe that there is objective knowledge, then this would lead to a conclusion that there is a God that grounds that objective knowledge. Otherwise we couldn't ground that objective knowledge. I think we will probably have a show on this subject, on the various transcendental arguments for God's existence, because there's a few.
Okay. Yeah, I'd love to hear it one day.
Yep. We'll be getting into that probably soon. But Sean, we appreciate you coming on and your continued support. May Allah bless you.
Okay, thanks, guys. Have a good one.
All right, take care.
Take care.
All right, looks like we've got Pio next.
When I say Salaam Alaikum,
yeah.
Siri thinks I'm talking to her, and then pops up.
Yeah, I can also say Shalom. I think that will be okay.
Wa alaikum salam.
So thank you for having me.
Are you Jewish, Pio?
Yes. But I'm an atheist, right? And you will see that, there's a contradiction in it, but we are not talking about that, right?
No.
Your topic was like the free will. And
well, no, the topic was actually what's logic got to do with it, how to spot logical contradictions. But of course, if you've got a specific thing that you think is a contradiction, we'll take a look at it.
So
but the stream was mainly just about explaining what logic is and what contradictions are.
Okay. I'm not, and I have to admit, I'm not the greatest philosopher on this earth. So you have, of course, better knowledge than I have. But I will ask you, what will be the reason to make a choice in any ways? So what will be, from your perspective, a reason to make a choice at all? It doesn't matter for what it is. And according to your answer, I will ask you the next question. And then you will come to the contradictions.
Okay. I don't know if anybody understood the question, because I really didn't get it.
I mean, if I could just understand it, like if I could just answer it like the way I understood it,
yes.
Reason to do something can be as simple as like I'm thirsty, so I drink. I'm thirsty, so I choose to drink.
So it's like the necessity of.
No. So I'm thirsty, but I can choose not to drink. But I'm thirsty, and
like when we're
I'm thirsty, I can also choose to drink. So
the month of Ramadan, we are very thirsty, but we take it upon ourselves not to drink.
So it's like a condition you have, and based upon this condition, you will choose or not choose to do something, right?
Possibly. I mean, you could have so you could have a reason that's non-necessitating in the sense that the reason doesn't entail, whatever it is that follows.
And if you will do something which will, because you talked about being thirsty, this is like a condition that your body is telling you, you are thirsty, please take some water to you. Right?
Yeah.
But it's not the usual stuff, or it's not the only stuff. What I'm trying to say isn't, and you can say you agree or not, that to make a choice, and then you are need something or you don't need something, and then you choose to do something or you choose not to do something. Would you agree with that? And I'm trying to be as broad as I can.
I mean, I'm not sure what you're saying, to be honest. I mean, we have reasons to do things, and we can choose what to do based on those reasons, I guess.
But if you have reasons, it will mean that you are thinking of them and kind of base
So,
your.
Pio, can I help you out?
Yeah.
Basically, are you trying to say that the reasons for you to make choices is because of external conditions that you do not control?
What I'm trying to get at, if somebody makes choices, there must be a reason for it. And if there is a reason, he is just thinking of that. He's not neutral about that. He just
Why does
thinks,
it need to be neutral?
I will come to that. But
So if I have two Snicker bars right in front of me and they're equidistant from me, they're like in the same equal distance from me, and I choose one, would you say the same thing, that there are reasons I have for choosing one over the other? Because not from my experience.
The reason will be that I want to eat. It doesn't.
The reason will be that I want to eat, but the reason I chose one over the other? I'm telling you, I have two identical ones, and they're just at the same distance from me. I could choose one or the other, right?
Yeah, but I'm not asking that. The reason that you chose it in the first place to choose one is that you want to eat.
Okay, so yeah, so are you trying to make like an argument, are you trying to argue in favor of determinism, that everything we choose is based on prior reasons and things that,
Okay.
It might be helpful, Pio, if you just lay out the argument.
Yeah.
Yes. I should do it now, right? So you are saying that there is a God who is not depending on anything, and then he chooses. He does not need universes, he creates universes. He does not need suns, but he creates suns. He does not need people, but he creates people. And for me, that's a contradiction. Because if a God, and if I look up all your definitions for a God, he does not need anything. He should be in a Zen.
Yeah, but Pio, so based on what you just said, I can just substitute those sentences with the Snickers example. I don't need the Snickers, but I ate a Snickers. How is that a contradiction? I mean,
why does there need to be a need in order for there to be an action?
Yeah, a contradiction just to get you on track is A and not A. So I need the Snickers and I don't need it. If both of those are true,
no, it cannot be equal. If you say A is not A, cannot equal not A, means that you will not choose to take any one of them because you don't need it.
We read this out. Jake read this out a while ago. The standard definition of a contradiction is basically the conjunct of A and not A. Both of those being true at the same time in the same way. So what I'm saying is me not needing a Snickers yet choosing to eat it. That there's no A and not A there. You might have questions about why I ate it. It's just
I think he's assuming that action necessarily entails a need, and I think that's
a dependency.
I think that's false.
No, because you think I will
you have to give an argument for it because we can give plenty of counter examples to that.
Where we act without.
We do plenty of actions without a need.
I don't need to be on the stream right now.
Right,
but I'm on it.
You could choose not to live at all. But of course, you are human. We are talking about a being which doesn't need anything. There is no reason for him to do anything, but he still creates. What is the reason for it?
So you said he doesn't need anything.
Yeah.
And then you said there's no reason for him to do anything. That's not true.
Because if he does not need, because if he does not need anything, he will be in a Zen state. He will be all satisfied with himself. He will be
No,
lucky.
so satisfaction, yes. So I don't need the Snickers bars, but I can have a reason to eat it, like I like Snickers bars. So the problem here, Pio, is that you're coming from a place. I get that you're trying to like speak your mind and explain your position to us, but then you need to be more clear with the terms you use and actually point out a contradiction. You're not doing that, because everything you're saying, I can give you a counterexample and explain to you that I can not need a Snickers bar, but yet have reasons to eat it. So
okay, P1, a God does not need anything. P2 is if he do something, he needs something.
That's false. That's what we're saying. It's false. That's why I said your
my premise. I'm
yeah,
just
but
saying.
Pio, hold on a second. You're assuming that an action necessitates a need, and we're giving counter examples to show that that's false. A reason doesn't mean that it's necessary. That's the second point. That's another presupposition that you have that we also reject. So you need to give an argument for the premise other than just stating it, because we're giving counter examples to it.
Yeah.
No,
so you need to backstep basically.
I want to choose this one, or there is no reason because I just want to eat.
Pio,
but you're wanting. You're doing it all.
No, I'm not wanting. I'm not wanting. No, I'm not. I don't need to, in order for me to perform an action, doesn't mean that I have a need.
But why then you will do anything if you don't need to have a reason, as you stated?
Yeah, but a reason is not a need. That's the point. A reason is a partial explanation, or it could be a full explanation, but it's not a need necessarily.
Yeah, but there is a reason. It's meaning just very broad. There is a reason. It means that you want to change your state, whatever it means.
Can there be a reason without a need?
No.
Well, that's the thing. You're saying there cannot be a reason without a need. You need to provide an argument for that.
Because for everything, for at least we do, there is a reason, right?
But even if I have a reason, it doesn't require a need. I have a reason for being on the stream. It doesn't mean I need to be here. Like if you keep repeating to me over and over again that I have to have a need, I'll probably just boot you from the stream just to prove the point.
Yeah.
So, and then what are you going to say? I needed to do that? No, I can choose to stay here and talk to Pio about needs or not having needs, or I could just say, you know what, the hell with it, and leave the stream.
See, Pio, Abdurrahman gave an example earlier. He said if you got two chocolate bars which are equidistant to each other, and you pick one over the other one, yeah, the decision here is between two equidistant chocolate bars. So he's saying that you don't have to have a need to pick one over the other. Yeah. So this is a clear example of a choice that's not predicated upon a need.
Okay, you're right in the example what we are talking about. But I'm talking, of course, about the God who already knows what will happen, whatever choice he makes. I'm saying, what will be the reason for him to create anything? He knows the outcome.
Yeah, but now
so this is a very good demonstration.
This is the second issue.
This is a very good demonstration of why we're having this stream, right? So you initially came on saying you're trying to demonstrate a contradiction, but it shouldn't be very difficult to at least present a valid form, which I think you did kind of when you mentioned that, in order God doesn't need anything, and in order to act you must need something. So here the thing is you might be able to present a valid argument. The problem is we're going to reject that premise that every act requires a need. You're saying that, okay, fine, maybe in the case of humans you don't need needs, but in the case of God there's maybe some distinction you're pointing to. But you need to substantiate that. You need to explain why God's act necessitates that he needs it. If it's just an intuition you have, in your mind, that's okay, but you're not going to convince us by that, in the sense that we don't understand where you're coming from. So you're going to have to substantiate the claim that God acting necessitates that he has a need.
In fact, I'm saying the opposite, but I'm trying to explain
so
it.
so if I understand what you said, Pio. Oh, sorry, go on, Karen.
So I would say every human, when he does anything, he has a need. He's doing because of reasons and because he doesn't know the future. And the different stuff for a God, and I'm not trying to disprove your God, I'm just asking about the concept, right? About the concept. I'm not here to like disprove your religion or something. And we are just talking, right? I'm not debating.
Yeah.
So I don't understand. So I understand when you say for a human, he will choose that or he will do some this and this action. Yeah, because there's a reason. And the biggest reason of it, from my perspective, is he does not know the future. In the case of a God, he already knows what will happen. And he does not need anything. And he still creates. What is the reason for a God to create?
Yeah. So, Pio, there's a few things that we need to identify. The first thing that we need to identify is that, is this an argument that results in a logical contradiction?
Yeah, for me, it's a logical contradiction when somebody says that God created something, because for me, and I'm an atheist, right? I just going with the explanation of other people. So for me, so you can teach me on that, yeah? No,
Yeah.
there is no doubt about it, right? But I don't understand if there is an all-knowing, all-powerful God that he will do anything because he already knows what will happen. And yeah, for me, a God will be in a Zen state, like he'll be lucky with himself.
Yeah. See, Pio, this is part of the issue is that what tends to happen is when people say there's a contradiction, what they're doing is they've got a lot of loaded philosophical assumptions or assumptions that they're bringing to the table. So, for example, initially you brought to the table that when a person does an act, it's because he needs something because he's incomplete. Then we explained that. And then you start saying, well, the reason why a person does an act is because he doesn't know what's going to happen in the future, so he doesn't act. Yeah. And I'm sure we can give many examples where people act even when they do know
I
what's going
didn't
to happen
spoke
in the
in
future.
this case about persons. I talk about God. I said that
No, but you're
every person is
analogizing between the
doing
two.
for
Yeah,
the
this is
for
the
the
point.
reason.
This is the point. The point is you're analogizing between what human beings do, and then you're analogizing that to God. So all I'm saying is that what you're doing is you're taking a lot of your own presuppositions and attempting to apply it to God, and therefore saying, if God exists, then he would not have done X, or he would have done X based upon my assumptions about what I would do regards to this. So that's the problem. The problem is that you have to question your own presuppositions, because we will question it and we will engage in that discussion of saying, actually, this is the case. Why do you think this is the case? And if you can't justify that, then you can't say that it reduces to a contradiction. Yeah. And I don't think you can justify any of the presuppositions that you presented so far, but you need to recognize your presuppositions. That's the issue.
Sharif, I agree with you that I'm doing my propositions, and I also already explained that everything what I do is based on some reasons. And I did compare God to me or humans. I make the distinction between an all-knowing God and a human. And that's why I said the humans are doing stuff because they don't know what will happen. And they don't always know the right thing.
Yeah.
But
Pio, let me stop you right there about the knowing the future thing. Well, again, this is not a logical, argument if that's what you're trying to do. I mean, if you're just speaking your mind, it's fine. But if you're trying to say that knowing the future means that you can't do things because you know what's going to happen, I mean, how do you make that link? I can know I can know the future and still do things.
But what will be this is for me a contradiction. If I already know,
I can know how I'm going to feel when I eat a Snickers bar and still eat it. The problem is, Pio, you have this intuition about the way things work. That
No,
if I
I'm
knew
just here to
something, or
hear
if God is
your
all-knowing.
opinion. So let's be clear about that.
I understand.
Okay.
I'm not trying to argue with you, and I appreciate talking to you. What I'm saying is I'm giving you my perspective. I'm saying I hear you just sharing your intuition about the way things should work in the case of an all-knowing being, but I don't see any, logical deconstruction of that intuition. I just see you saying that it feels like if he knew everything that's going to happen, he will not do something. But how do you make that jump? How do you make that inference between knowing the future and not being able to do things, or not doing things? I just don't see a logical entailment there. You just think that that's what would happen if he knew the future.
Yeah,
So
Pio,
in order for you to convince me with that, I think you're going to have to do more work and substantiate it. That's all.
Yeah. So, for
Okay,
example, Pio, really quickly, I could give an example, a counter example. I could say, well, I know that if I offer this chocolate to this, child or son or whoever it is, he'll take it. Now, my knowledge of what's going to happen in the future is not going to say, well, therefore, I'm not going to offer chocolate to this kid. Yeah. So I'm still going to, I can still offer the chocolate to the kid, even though I know what the consequence is going to be in terms of the action. Yeah. So it doesn't, this is the problem. Problem is that your positions doesn't entail a logical contradiction, and it doesn't entail something that's a metaphysical impossibility. Yeah. These two different things. Rather, what it is that you've got these sort of feelings of how people think and why people act, and then you're attempting to claim, well, let me superimpose this upon God, and therefore results in a contradiction. It doesn't result in a contradiction. It only results in a contradiction based upon the presuppositions, which I think are unfounded, that you have, that you hold on to. Yeah, so you're superimposing your view and then saying, because it doesn't accord to my view, it's therefore a contradiction.
When I will go, and I'll be, after that you can leave me out because there are other people. If I will go only with just your example, offering the kid the chocolate, right?
Yeah.
But if I knew this chocolate will poison him, would you do it? Still do it?
Depends, isn't it? If I knew,
what do you mean?
If I didn't like the kid.
What do you mean? What do you mean?
Little Hitler? Is it little Hitler?
No, it says nothing. No. Let's go now to extreme. Let's go stick by the example.
No. But that's why he's saying it depends. There are extremes.
No, your knowledge, exactly. Your knowledge is you'll give the child the chocolate, and the child will take it, but this chocolate will poison him.
Yeah.
Would you still do it?
Well, like I said, me personally, obviously it's haram for me to do that. I wouldn't do that because it's not allowed Islamically. But in this fictional scenario, the issue isn't about whether you would give somebody a bar of chocolate that's poison. The issue is, if I know the consequence of the future, just by knowing the consequence of the future, does it stop me from doing the action? No, it doesn't stop me from doing the action.
So you will poison the kid.
So no. The point.
No, he told you he wouldn't.
Yeah, it's not analogous.
Pio, your argument was this. Initially, your argument was about how actions are basically
changed like 3 times already.
And then it became about, well, if God knows things in the future, why would He act? Because humans only act based upon not knowing what's the consequence. I gave a rebuttal to that, and now you're saying, well,
you just said, it would
if you're giving a poisonous chocolate to a child, would you do it knowing the consequence? But again, just that's not analogous to the initial point. That's my issue.
Okay, you just said it, and thank you very much for your talks. Thank you for having me, and I will go now. See you next time.
Take care. Bye.
Yeah.
Take care.
Bye.
All right, so we've got Mr. Danish next, right?
I mean, can we just look at this real quick?
I think it's Danish, not Danish.
Our friend here, Matthew Bardis, who's come on the show a few times. Here are 2 contradictions. The Quran and many early Muslims believed that humans had no free will. Now they say they do have free will. Here's another one. Allah tests people, but Allah knows the future. I mean, really, this is why we're doing the stream. Come on.
And this guy Matthew Bardos is a lawyer. Imagine this guy is the one that's supposed to be defending you in court and making arguments. Or maybe you know what? If he's the plaintiff, I would say, please, can you bring Matthew to represent the state? I'd like to get off easy. I'm sorry, Matt, but I think that you should have taken a bit more attention to some basic critical thinking courses in your university career.
No, but we like Matthew anyway. But it is a bad
I'm not
argument.
saying I don't like him. I mean, I'm just saying it's a bad argument, and that he has mentioned that he's a lawyer, and I find it interesting because lawyers are the ones that are supposed to be constructing or defending against arguments, and these are the kind of people that we have in that position. So, anyway, I wouldn't hire you, Matt. That's all I'm saying.
Assalamu alaikum.
Well,
I had a question. This is I'm sorry to interrupt you guys. Can you guys call on me like next because I have to help one of my parents do something.
Yeah, sure. We'll bring you back.
Yeah, okay.
Sure.
It'll take like 2 minutes. Thank you.
No problem. I think we got Abu Muhamed next.
That's it. Danish is not coming back on now.
Danish.
Mr. Danish.
Danish.
Abu Muhammad, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How you guys doing?
Alhamdulillah, good man. What about yourself?
Alhamdulillah, I mean, it's been a while.
Alhamdulillah, it's good hearing your voice.
Yeah, likewise.
Have you got a comment?
Yeah, I got a question.
Yeah.
I know Abdul mentioned a little bit, but I just need a little bit example. Can you give an example of something that is logically possible, physically possible, and metaphysically possible? And is there anything such as ontological possibility?
Yeah. So something that's logically possible and metaphysically possible. So I mean, logically possible and metaphysically actual is easy, which is also like possible in the sense that it exists in a possible world, which is the actual world, the existence of this world, the universe. I mean, that's metaphysically possible and logically possible. But I mean, other stuff like metaphysical modality is a bit tricky because it's just going to depend on what your view, what your theory of modality is. That's going to determine what you think is actually metaphysically possible. So that's a very deep discussion. But what was the second question?
Ontological. Is there anything as ontologically possibility?
Yeah. So there's there's something like called ontological necessity, for example. That it's basically the fact that more like of if you have like a causal chain, and then you have a first member in that causal chain, you say like it's ontologically necessary, for the chain to be. So that's an ontological necessity.
Interesting. So let's say if someone say something can come from nothing, would that fall under logical possibility, illogical possibility, physical possibility?
Yeah, that's a good question. So if you can't derive a contradiction from it, you wouldn't be able to say it's a logical impossibility. It's a yeah. So you could say it's a metaphysical impossibility. So something can be a logical possibility, but a metaphysical impossibility.
Yeah.
Very good answer, man. Last one.
Yeah.
How is contradiction same as impossibility? And how can one prove something to be impossible?
So a metaphysical impossibility doesn't have to be a contradiction. We just discussed one, right? So something coming from nothing. A logical impossibility, yes, I think it has to be a contradiction. And what was the last thing you said?
How do you prove something to be impossible?
Contradiction. I mean, there's proof by contradiction is a big thing in logic. So proof by contradiction is huge. You can prove something also like it's like a conditional impossibility, which is similar to a metaphysical impossibility, based on certain assumptions or within a certain paradigm. You can prove that something is metaphysically impossible. Nomological modality as well, which deals with like the laws of nature and stuff. So within a scientific paradigm, you know, the scientists can say that, you know, such and such happening is impossible, and they'd be speaking more in like a nomenological sense.
Alhamdulillah. Good answer, man.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Everybody support the cat team.
Thank you, Muhammad.
Subscribe, share.
Did Abdurrahman pass then? Yeah.
Yeah, you did. I made it easy for him today.
Thanks, bro. Thanks a lot. Good to hear your voice.
Likewise. Assalamu alaikum, brother.
All right, let's go back to
Danish.
Salam, are you ready, brother, or you need a couple more minutes?
I'm good.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. So, my question, you guys probably have maybe covered this, but I came in late and I wanted it to be answered. So, I was like researching, and basically, one of like the arguments we have against like Christianity is that like Jesus, alayhi salam, couldn't have been a man because this went against the intrinsic attributes of Allah, right? So Allah is one, but Christianity proposes three gods, as well as one. Jesus was begotten, but Allah is eternal, God is eternal. So different arguments like this, right? So I had a question about free will and how that squared up with one of Allah's attributes, right? So if Allah is all powerful over all things, right? How would it be, wouldn't it be contradictory to have free will for humans in any sort of way, since Allah is powerful over all things and humans are a thing as well? So humans having any degree of autonomy for themselves, how is that like, how does that square up in like the Islamic conception?
So there's a number of ways to answer this. I'm sure the other brothers will add their points as well, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala having power and control over all things. So for example, my choice, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has power and control over me in terms of even when I make a free choice. Maybe the analogy that I give is like if you have a child and the child is next to a fire and the child wants to put its hand into the fire and the father is there, then the father can stop the child at any moment. The father still has that power to intervene at any moment. So if the child places the hand into the fire, then the child has done so by the permission of the father, yeah, in essence, even though it was from the free will of the child, yeah. So in the same way, we can take actions by our free will, but our actions that are done by our free will are by the permission, bi'idnillah, by the permission of Allah. So there's no contradiction in terms of saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all powerful and that we have free will.
Okay, so can I ask like a follow-up question to that?
Yeah, sure.
So if just so I can like get it straight in my head and like kind of understand it more appropriately, right? So if Allah is which Allah is completely all powerful over all things, in that analogy, wouldn't like even the child even having like the thought or the will of even going towards the fire, right? Not the action itself, but even the will itself of going towards the fire, isn't that also completely controlled by Allah or like determined by Allah as well? And like because the way the answer I think you're basically giving is like our will would not exist if Allah chose it to not exist, right? But even us having a will by like Allah's permission, right? How is that like possible? Because isn't it kind of like how Christians would say, oh, Allah chose like something to happen, like to give to like have a begotten son that is also God. How is that also like not like a contradiction?
I see. It's a very good question, but that last part I don't see how it's analogous. I mean, it's a good question because you're asking about God's sovereignty over all things, but I don't see how it would be like similar to God begetting a son.
I guess it doesn't apply to your answer, but other people's answer is like what some other people have answered like to this question is like Allah chose for some people to have a will that Allah has no control over, right? So Allah like relinquishes his sovereignty over the human being's will. So isn't that
Yeah,
similar
but
to
having
like
a will is not the same as being God. I mean, you can have a will, a free will, without being God. It's not all what it takes. That's not all it takes to be God. And God begetting a son, that's completely different. That's you're basically God sharing his divinity, and that results in certain contradictions. If you think, for example, that God is ase, as in God necessarily exists of himself, then that's a contradiction in terms for a God to be begotten, because he needs to be self-existing. But but in the case of free will, I mean, I don't know. You want to say that everything that is a free agent is God? I don't think that's what you're saying. I don't think that's
Danish,
true.
Oh no,
yeah,
that's not what I was
Danish is
trying
saying.
to.
Let me explain what you're saying. Then you can, you can maybe say that what I'm explaining. What you're trying to say is this: is that God is all powerful, and God gives up power to allow human beings to have free will. And you're saying, therefore, if God can give up a portion of an attribute, an eternal attribute, then why can't he give up some other attributes in order to become like man? Is that your argument?
Exactly. Yeah,
Right.
yeah, exactly. So it's not like why can't he? It's like more like we don't have any ground to go against like the Christian claim. Basically, if we say like if some speakers say like Allah gives up His power in order for humans to have a free will, then they don't have any ground to like go against Christianity or like what Christians say. It's just like a way more extreme version of what they're saying.
Yeah. So the difference is though is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't give up part of His power. So there's no power that's being given up, because at any moment Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can stop us from having free will. So it's not like we are independent agents that are able to do things even in contradiction to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants. Yeah, so we're never in that situation. All our abilities is derivative because they're created by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we don't have any independent capability. If we had independent capability, i.e. that we could just make choices even in contradiction to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants, then you would have an argument, or they would have an argument. But we don't say that. We say that we have been given this ability by Allah as contingent beings, been created with this ability by Allah, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at any moment can control and influence or take it away from us. That we can therefore not do things except by the permission of Allah.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so basically, what you're trying to say is that like our will is not independent to Allah's will. It's just we have a degree of autonomy, but that autonomy is like maintained by Allah's power. Like Allah could take it away like any second He wants to, or like keep it like He does for us right now. Okay.
Yeah. For example, if our will was to conflict with His will at any point, Allah has made it quite clear that we will be judged based on our intentions. So, it's like one of the first, well, it is the first hadith in Sahih Bukhari, where it talks about you will be judged based on your intentions. So, for example, if you wanted to do something and that came into conflict with the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He could override that, but then still, hold you accountable for that. So, for example, if you want to murder an innocent person, but circumstances arise because that person's destined to do something in the future, where this, your plan is sort of ruined or spoiled, you still intended to do that. You would still, had you been given the opportunity to do that, would have done it, etc. So, there's ways of understanding that Allah can basically set things up with a particular mechanism where you are capable of having intention and trying to act that out, and then judge you based on that. And
okay, that makes sense. And for like the person that went before us, the answer you guys gave for my question makes sense. But for the person that went before us, he was talking. I think he was the one that was talking about like why does Allah create anything if He's like by Himself? Isn't it just like we say that like like He's not adding to anything he has Himself, but He's just like exhibiting His attributes. Like if He creates humans, He's not like becoming merciful. He's just like enacting His mercy. So it's not like adding or subtracting anything from Himself. Like
Yeah,
I don't
exactly.
understand.
He's expressing the attribute. It's not that the
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's a possible explanation. So that's what we would say. It's not a necessary explanation, but it's a possible explanation people give. Yeah. But I think the issue is that from a purely from our perspective, see, the problem with atheists is that they try to say, okay, if God exists, God would create a world like this. If there's world like this, or God would desire X. If X doesn't exist, therefore God doesn't exist. They go from a very top-down approach, whereas if you look at all of our streams, we go from a bottom-up approach. We go from what we can sense and know, and then build the argument to that there is a necessary being that has a will, whereas and there's nothing contradictory regards that. But what you find is that what atheists do is they have a lot of baggage, they have a lot of presuppositions, assumptions that they already hold, and then they apply it to God and then negate God. Yeah. So the better way, the more rational way, is try to remove or minimize all your presuppositions and look at based upon what we can sense and build the argument up, and then you come to the conclusion. Now, asking the question, why did God create? Well, yeah, my mind is limited. I'm not going to fully understand that. I might be able to give some possible examples or possible explanations, but they're not going to be definitive. They're just simply like stories that we can give. And this is another point that I probably wanted to mention earlier, which is one of the ways to counteract a logical contradiction when somebody says that something's a contradiction is all you have to do is give a possible explanation, yeah, to counteract it. Like I think Yusuf mentioned it earlier, if you can just give a counter to that position. So if you can just give a story and say, well, here's an example of why something could be, you're not saying it is the case, you're just saying this is a possible explanation. And if you've got a possible explanation, you can't say it's a contradiction anymore.
Okay.
Jazakallah khair. Anyway, I think we're going to go on to our next caller, are we not?
Yeah. Yeah, we got
Thanks a lot, Danish.
Danish. Jazakallah
Thanks
khair,
a lot. Very good questions. Jazakallah khair.
So I go.
Assalamu alaikum. All right, and now we have a Mr. Bartos.
Hi again, everybody. I got a little lag. Can you hear me good?
Yeah,
we can hear you.
We'll
Great.
let Jake discuss with you.
That sounds great. Thanks for having me on again. Well, I've been on this is my third time now. I never actually introduced myself, so I wanted to tell Jake because he kind of called me out about being a lawyer and all that. So yes, I'm a lawyer, but I don't know what country you guys are all from. I'm a civil lawyer. I don't do criminal law, so I'm not prosecution or defense. I do plaintiff, as you pointed out, but I sue people for breach of contract. So
cool. Yeah, but even there, you still have to make arguments.
Yeah, and I know you're going to think I can't, because of lawyer-client privilege, tell you, the details of what I do, but I guarantee you're going to say I'm lying if I told you my win-loss record. I've won 40,000 cases and I've lost 6. It's the truth.
That's very worrying. That's very worrying. That's very worrying.
But that makes me sound a lot better than I am. It's just because the nature of my job, I don't bring a case unless I know I'm going to win. So there is in those 6, there is an unexpected surprise because I review the case before I begin it, so I know that I'm going to win beforehand. But
is that why you join here? Because you know you're going to win?
Well, I like to have a discussion more so than a debate. There's no one here scoring points, but I am astonished. I try to get in, I am an atheist, so I try to get into the mind of the theist because I'm 34 years old and I've never been able to understand it. I've been an atheist since I've been an adult, and I don't get it. So, but yeah, why don't we ask the 2 questions that I brought up in the stream because that's why you guys wanted me on, and you seemed like incredulous about them. We could take either one. They're 2 different points. I don't know which you prefer. You want me to restate them?
You got to them. There's a lot. Yeah, I don't think we're able to bring it up because it's too far gone now to be able to put on the screen.
No, that's okay. So the first, there's 2. So the first one is we don't start as humans in either heaven nor hell. We start on earth. I've been told the explanation for this is that we are being tested by God to see which one of the 2 we're going to end up in. But it's a pointless test if he already knows the outcome. Why run the test if you know the outcome where he's predestined us to go to heaven or hell? The other related contradiction is if you read the Quran, and I brought this up last time I was on Surah 2:6 through 2:12, it says, okay, we're gonna maybe we'll have a fight about interpretation. My interpretation of that, and the interpretation of many early Muslims, was that it predestines people. So he knows who's going to be, and he actually 2:6 through 2:12.
Okay, Matthew, let's take the first one. So you said the first one is a contradiction. How do you define a contradiction? Are you saying it's a logical contradiction?
Because the point of a test is I don't know the outcome. I need to run a test to see what the outcome will be. But he already knows the outcome, so why is he running the test?
But how do you before we talk about the specific example, how do you define a logical contradiction? Because our stream today primarily is about how we understand what is a logical or logical impossibility, which results in a logical contradiction. So how do you understand what a logical contradiction is?
We could go into identity, non-contradiction, and excluded middle, the Aristotelian laws of thought. If something violates that, that would be a logical contradiction.
Okay, so the three classical laws, you're saying if it violates one of the three classical laws, it's a logical contradiction. Yeah.
I mean, and your standard way. I mean, you're talking about identity and equivocation, A and not A, as Aristotle laid out.
So in this situation, are you claiming there's an internal contradiction, or are you using some external criteria to demonstrate a contradiction?
Well, why don't I lay it out and you can tell me if it's valid and sound?
No, I'm asking you. I'm asking what your position is. Are you saying this is an internal contradiction? This is what Islam says as one proposition. There's another proposition, and this proposition contradicts the original proposition. Is that what you're saying? Or are you saying these propositions contradict this? So the belief sets of Islam, the propositions that Islam has, contradicts a further proposition which we think is necessary, i.e. a necessary proposition, and therefore it's a contradiction, even though this necessary proposition is not actually explicitly mentioned within the Quran or within Islam. Do you see the difference between the two?
Yeah, I do. It's the first one. It's Islam says A and Islam says not A.
Okay, so it's an internal contradiction.
Mm-hmm.
So in this internal contradiction, you're saying that God tests human beings, but God knows what the end of that test is.
Therefore, the test is pointless. Therefore, he wouldn't do the test, but he does the test anyway.
Okay, so when you said the test is pointless, you're now going away from an internal critique.
But why don't I give you the logical form?
Because just so you know as well, before you do,
yeah, go on.
So this notion that it's pointless it is not true, because it is related to justice. So, for example, you can't punish someone for something or praise someone for something if they've not done it. So on the day of judgment, it talks about showing you your account and holding you accountable. So, you know, if he was just to, for example, create us and then just throw us into hellfire or paradise without us actually having done the action, then there is no relation to justice. It was like, well, you know, I didn't actually do that. However, by allowing creation to begin and then obviously to play out and for the tests to happen, then there is a justice in terms of the judgment.
But Yusuf and Sharif,
Well, if I can just respond to that.
In the first place, but the problem is the thing is, this stream is about logical contradictions, logic, right? And you came in saying that, you know, you think there is a position that's contradictory in Islam. Now you said, and you literally said A and not A. So you have to show where A and not A. Saying the test is pointless, even if it's pointless, doesn't demonstrate a contradiction. So where is, like, there is a point to the test, and then it's pointless. I mean, you need to. The problem is a lot of atheists come on these streams, and you know, atheists do have this mindset these days that, you know, atheism or new atheism is about evidence and enlightenment, right? And, you know, intellectual capacity. But the problem is these claims you're making, there's a way to show they're true. There's a way to falsify them, right? Now, I think you need to know that way. If you don't know that way, then it defeats the purpose. Yeah, it defeats the purpose of by the new atheist standards, being an atheist who is enlightened and basically knows what he's talking about, and only he speaks based on evidence and has reasonable positions. So if you're going to come on the stream and say there is a logical contradiction, the least you can do is present a valid deductive syllogism, premise, conclusion that is logically valid, that is formally valid. I mean, if you can't do that, then I just think that
Abdul,
we're going to keep going
when
in
you
circles.
rerun this tape,
I've
offered to do it twice. So when you rerun this tape,
let Matthew do it.
Go ahead, do it. Premise, conclusion.
Premise 1: the purpose of a test is to determine an outcome. We're not going to get past that?
No.
False.
Because
Really?
now it's no longer an internal critique.
Right. Yeah, that's false. We would disagree with that.
So what is your definition of test?
The test doesn't necessarily have to be for the tester. It could be for the one that's tested.
What difference does that make?
Because it's not to know what the person is going to do necessarily.
So when I run a test in a laboratory, I combine two chemicals and I want to see what's going to happen when they combine. Is the point not to see what happens, the outcome? We would define that as a test.
Yeah, but what you're doing is you're using your own definition of you're
telling me
basically
that's not
saying
the definition of a test.
No, I'm saying it's not.
When I go
Saying
in to
you're-
bring my car emissions, they test to see what the emissions are. They have to run the test to see how much emissions are coming from my car.
Well, you
How
can,
many
read
times
what's
can I
on the,
use
you,
this
can read,
definition?
you can read what's on the screen. So anyway, we reject your definition. So straight off the bat, your argument's not going to work.
You're just rejecting my definition by assertion. Can you show me?
No.
That's
You're asserting that it means that. You're asserting that that's the only possible way to
Go ahead
understand
and
what a test
disprove it.
is.
Okay,
I just did.
So
Are you admitting that it's one definition?
Matt, like for example, I knew that you were going to come on here and come with a silly argument, but it's still a test.
What?
I knew you were going to come on here with a silly argument, and you're still being tested.
So knowledge doesn't negate a test.
Matthew,
So even this
go
comment,
back to your first premise again. Go back to your first premise.
The point of a test is to determine an outcome that you don't already know.
So do you understand why we reject that is a necessary definition of a test?
As long as it's one definition, I can still run the rest of the argument.
No, because if it's one definition, it's no longer a logical contradiction. It's a presupposition. It's an assumption that this definition is the only definition that I'm going to use, even though there are other definitions that could be used.
So what is the definition of a test for us being on this earth in Islam?
So what's the definition of the test? So that we as human beings can undertake actions which are halal or haram, or undertake actions which are belief or disbelief.
So we're using the same definition, so I'm fine.
We
are
human beings.
So wait a minute. So look what you're doing here. You're using my definition, and you're saying that that's still a problem.
No, because you're trying to apply this upon God. You're saying, well, God would not set out the test if God knew the answer to it. Yeah. Now, what Jake said is that tests sometimes are not for the one who gives the test. Sometimes the test is for the one who takes the test. Yeah.
And I say, why does that matter if God knows the outcome anyway? He predetermined the way that I'm going to take the test.
So for example, in college, I had a science teacher, and he'd been a science teacher for many years, and he'd been doing these tests for many years, and he knew exactly what was going to occur at the end of the tests. But he still had us do the tests, despite him knowing what the outcome was.
So he I don't know if you say he knew exactly. That would be a miracle. He had a good guess. He didn't know exactly, but you believe that God knows exactly.
No,
Let's explain that further.
So like he was a science teacher. He said, if you drop this penny, it's going to fall at a particular rate. Now, and then we did the tests to prove that. So those are still tests, despite the answers being known.
Yeah, but that's different. That's important. That what he was doing was demonstrating something.
Well,
with a
so
test.
he's trying to teach people.
With a test.
Yeah.
I
So-
mean, guys, let's cut to the chase. The idea is, Matthew, your argument would be form. I didn't hear the second premise and the conclusion, but assuming that it's form. Yeah. So assuming that you're going to show that it has to be to determine the result, and then you derive from that a contradiction. It would be formally valid, and it would work for someone who accepts your definition. But definitions aren't that rigid. I mean, the idea is the concept of a test. Nothing in the concept of a test necessitates ignorance about the outcome. Nothing. There's no direct logical connection. There's no entailment relation between, the idea, the concept of a test, and your knowledge of the outcome. You
Under
can
this
say
definition of test, it is.
On this definition, fine. So if I accepted your definition, I'd say that will be a contradictory.
Now the
position.
question is, do you accept my definition? Because Sharif was saying that the point of us being on the planet is to see if we do the good things or the bad things. So that seems like we're looking for that outcome.
No, not to see. He's not saying so God can see. He says it's and Jake explained that the test can be more for the person who's being tested than the tester. I'm just saying that in order for you to bring this to a logical contradiction, Matthew, you shouldn't rely on the basis of your argument shouldn't rely on a definition that can really go either way. We're coming from different places.
Unless you agree with my definition, because if you agree with my definition, then you're just making us wrong.
We explained we don't. We explained that we don't.
Okay, but wait, that's the part I need to know why. I need to know why you don't agree with the definition.
So Matthew, if you're doing an internal critique and you're trying to derive a contradiction from within the Islamic paradigm, then you should understand what the Islamic conception of a test is, and you clearly would see that God testing humans doesn't mean that God doesn't know what humans will do, because we believe in foreknowledge. You're saying that it's a contradictory position because of your presumption that these two things, foreknowledge and testing, are impossible, to be like conjuncts with one another. But that's not really the Muslim position. So right now, it's not going to really be an argument about, it's going to be an argument about the definition. And there's no reason why we have to accept your very narrow definition, as opposed to us just merely saying that there's no necessity for ignorance in the concept of a test. It doesn't necessitate that you're ignorant about the outcome. We're not even saying that, in some tests you can be ignorant. In fact, maybe even we can tell you even most of them. From our experience, yes, but the idea is, in a logical argument, you have to show that it's either all or nothing, right? You can make a case for why it's more likely that all tests should require or should preclude the idea of foreknowledge, but we're not going to accept that. I mean, and really, how are you going to show that? How are you going to demonstrate
You're giving an answer without an explanation. You're not explaining why then God would do the test.
We gave you several. I mean, Yusuf gave you several examples of us knowing the result of a test, but still doing it.
Yes, but why?
Building, you could have.
What do you mean? What do you mean? Why? We can. Yeah.
So
we can have reasons.
So God started the ball rolling. He created everything. So it was his decision to give the test. He already knows what's going to happen. So why is he giving the test?
Because it's character building for free creatures.
But we're not free.
So
That's
many
your claim.
assumptions
We
here.
believe we're free. So again,
many assumptions here.
But Abdul just said there's foreknowledge, and God created us. So we're not.
Foreknowledge again, an assumption saying that if you know something, that the person's not free. That's what I'm saying. You're not.
It's a two-step process. Wait, let me just explain this, because you guys say this all the time, and you're not getting it. It's a two-step process. God creates, step one. God knows the future, step two. It's not just step two. It's step one. He creates, knowing the future. He set in motion the outcome.
Yeah, but just because he creates doesn't mean that we're not free. That's the point.
Really? I just explained why it is. So it's premise, conclusion.
It's not.
God knows what's going to happen. He sets the chain in motion. Therefore, we're not free.
Matthew, before we go on to another argument.
Yeah, this is a different argument.
Do you understand what Abdurrahman's saying? He's saying that when you say something's a logical contradiction and you're using the definition of a word, you have to demonstrate that the word test entails your definition. Like, for example, if I say a married bachelor is a logical contradiction. It's because the word married and bachelor, they entail a contradiction. Now you're giving a definition of the word test, a possible definition that's not entailed by the word test. Yeah. So you're not giving a logical contradiction by using a possible definition that's not entailed necessarily by its definition.
Yeah, I get all of that, and I still haven't heard why you don't agree with my definition. Merely, you're just asserting you don't agree with it, but you're not just giving me the actual reason.
We gave you examples why. We gave you examples.
Because
why.
Matthew
Yusuf gave me an example. The closest one of you gave me an example was Yusuf about the coin flip or the dropping the coin.
No,
but his professor had a different reason for doing that. So that's what I'm looking for. What is God's reason for the test then? So the professor's reason was to demonstrate the effect of gravity.
Matthew. So you said at the beginning that you're doing an internal critique to demonstrate a clear logical contradiction. Yeah. So the onus of the proof, or the onus of substantiating that, is now on you, Matthew. So you have to now do the work, yeah, to demonstrate a logical contradiction. Now, if you demonstrate an apparent logical contradiction, then we have to do the work in order to demonstrate a possible explanation to demonstrate that it's not a logical contradiction. You haven't done the work yet because you failed in the first part, which is to say that the test necessarily entails this definition. You agreed that the word test does not necessarily entail a particular or one particular definition. So as a result, you're not creating a logical contradiction at this moment in time. It's not for us now to give a definition of the word test. It's for you.
It is a logical contradiction if you accept my definition. So I've still done. That's where you disagree. So it's fine.
Yeah,
so
that's the point.
If we accept it, but are we obligated by logical necessity to accept that definition?
I'm going to say yes, and then you're going to say, well, you have to.
Okay, so you say yes.
Matt, is your definition of a test the same thing as a triangle having 3 angles?
No.
Okay, so they're not on equal playing field. That's the point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So your definition of a test is not. We don't need to accept it by logical necessity in the same way that triangle has 3 sides.
But the point is, you're only asserting that you don't accept the definition.
We gave you reasons why. We gave you reasons why. You might not like them, but
I heard Yusuf's, but I don't understand any of the other.
Matthew,
because why did God do this?
So
there's 2 issues here. The first issue, Matthew, is you have to show that the word test entails your definition. If you have said that the word test does not entail your definition, it's only a possible definition, then that's it, game over. You can't demonstrate that it's a logical contradiction.
That's a very glass half empty. If my definition is sometimes correct, why does it have to be universal? If it's sometimes correct, at least I've made a valid argument.
That's it. That's the point, though. If it's
that means it's possible, correct, it's not necessary.
It's possible.
So what?
That's the point. Therefore, it's not a necessary contradiction or an impossibility.
It still goes in the pile of evidence over here that it still weighs on the scales. I just made a valid and potentially sound argument that weakens your position.
No, Matt, we're not talking about weakening. Matt, we're not talking about weakening or strengthening. I think you think you're in the courtroom. You're not in the courtroom. The scale doesn't exist. You need to come down and smash the scale into pieces and say it's not there. That's what
in a courtroom, people's entire lives and livelihoods are on the line. It's a very important burden of evidence that is used there.
Let me help
you. This is ivory tower logic, which is fine. I like that too, but one has much graver consequences.
Yeah, let me help you out. Yeah,
so yeah, it does.
What you're doing, you're doing is you're not trying to demonstrate a logical contradiction. That's first. You're not doing that. Yeah, that's quite clear. But what you can say is, I'm giving a metaphysical argument to demonstrate the impossibility. Yeah, here's my presuppositions. Yeah, which are possible, or I'm giving an evidential argument against your position of test. That's what you should be saying, is an evidential argument. Yeah, not a logical contradiction. Because logical contradiction entails that the proposition not only results in a contradiction, but it becomes a meaningless proposition. Whereas what you have to say is, no, it's not going to result in a logical, a meaningless proposition or meaningless sentences. Rather, it's an evidential argument. Here is what I assume to be true. I think I have evidence of why I think it to be true. And that's why I discount X.
But the problem is what you're saying is a married bachelor is only a contradiction if the word bachelor means unmarried, and even though it has other definitions. But we use that as an example all the time.
Yeah, but it doesn't have other definitions. But Matt, we'll give you about 5 more minutes, and then we're gonna have to go to the next person.
Okay. If you got a problem with the word bachelor, you can say a four-sided triangle. Yeah.
Yeah. So if someone comes and disagrees with your definition of bachelor, and they add some, they add some nuance to the definition that
so
allows
you're just disagreeing my definition of test, but you're not saying otherwise it's invalid.
No, but here's the point. The point is, what we're disagreeing with is the idea that tests always have to be the way you're explaining them. Always have to go by your definition.
Right.
We're disagreeing with that. We agree you have reason to assume that, some tests should be, carried out in this way where you don't know the outcome. So like you gave the example of, doing science tests in a lab. You don't know the outcome. You're doing tests to see the result. Fine. In that context, yes. But that doesn't mean that every kind of test, because this is a very different kind of test, right? That doesn't mean that every kind of test requires this aspect of ignorance. It's just not. It's just not necessary.
That's the part, that last sentence there is what I don't understand why this is a different kind of test. But okay,
Yeah, so soul building, for example, right? So if you have a case where you will put someone through a certain difficulties, and this person is going to spiritually grow through these difficulties, that doesn't mean that necessarily you must be ignorant of the outcome. You can know the outcome is good, for example. You can know the outcome is good and still put them through that test because okay, at the end of the test, they're going to come out a better person. So even though I know they're going to come out a better person, well, I'm just going to go ahead with the test because
an omnipotent God who could cut to the chase by snapping his finger, and then we're in heaven with the soul that he wants.
No, soul building is about free creatures. It's about free creatures being able to exhibit.
But so that's why I brought up my second point. I don't. Where
right
the
now,
Quran
that's not the point. Right now,
will.
that's not the point. The point is we want to give you counter examples for the idea that every time there is a test, there cannot be foreknowledge. There must be ignorance. And I just gave you a scenario where I know that a certain test will make somebody grow as a person, right? And I can know the outcome of that, assume I have foreknowledge of it, and I can still do it. So
I don't know if human beings ever have complete foreknowledge of any.
But bro, you need to when we're doing philosophy, you give a lot of these thought experiments, and sometimes it doesn't have to necessarily reflect human reality. So you can give, and you could just grant for the sake of argument, just as a thought experiment, that there is a person who knows the future, and he knows that if his son, for example, goes through a particular test, he will be a better person. Does that mean that, oh wait, I know the future, so I'm not going to put him through the test and make him a better person? That would be ridiculous.
I think it very much depends on. Well, I think it very much depends on who starts the ball rolling. And that is a point that you guys constantly ignore. And I have 5 minutes.
Why does that make a difference? Because it's perfectly analogous. So God gets
the question is who is the verb? Who is doing the action here? Is it God or the person?
That's a different argument right now. So right now we're trying to establish that tests necessitate ignorance of the outcome of the test, right? We're trying to establish that part of your argument. You're taking it right now to free will. Right? So free will is a different discussion. That's a different contradiction from your perspective that we can talk about some other time. But right now, you just need to establish your first premise, because your first premise isn't even getting off the ground, because we're continuously giving you counter examples where it is possible to actually conduct a test.
I will take what Sharif said. I've provided evidence against your existence of God, just not proof, because I couldn't do A and not A. I just
Yeah.
piled evidence
Yeah, yeah.
because you admitted that even more frequently than not, a test is to determine its outcome.
Yeah,
They
but
are.
evidence.
Good
But just
enough
by
for
the way,
me.
evidence can be a deceiving word because there can be bad evidence. Like, for example, I could have evidence for Bigfoot. It's still evidence. It just doesn't have to be good evidence. The evidence doesn't necessarily mean that what I think the conclusion of the evidence is reasonable. You know,
Evidence has multiple facets.
You can say it's. Yeah. Evidence is basically a reason to believe something that makes a proposition more likely. So that's true. So you can have evidence for all kinds of unreasonable stuff. It's still evidence, but it can be bad evidence.
So let's see if you guys can defeat this one. A test is sometimes and perhaps most frequently defined as an experiment which people undertake where they don't know the outcome. God knows the outcome. God still does the test. That's a contradiction. Now
you can make an inductive argument. You can make an inductive argument. Most tests are like this. Therefore, it's most likely that even in the case of God, that kind of test will be like that.
Good. So I just gave a strong argument against the existence of God. Okay.
Doesn't mean it works, bro. It just means it's.
Can I jump in here? Can I jump in here for a moment? So the thing is if you're saying most, right? What you're saying is most of what we've experienced. Now, if it is the case that the test that the human being is being put through by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it's not true that most. If this is the exception of the case, or even if there are other exceptions, this one in particular, this particular exception means that most are not what you just said. Because there's more examples of the amount of human beings that have been created in order to go through this test. So what you're saying is completely dependent upon whether or not this example, that is the human being being created and put through a test, is a counter evidence to what you're putting forward. Now, with regards to evidences within the Quran and within the Sunnah, now, at no point is the proposition put forward that you are not a responsible agent. The Quran never makes this claim. On the contrary, it constantly puts forward the claim that you and me and everyone here is a responsible agent. So here is one. And so this is chapter, which one is it now? Chapter 18, Surah Qaf, verse
29.
Yes. Verse 29. And say, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, and say, the truth is from your Lord. Then whosoever wills, let him believe. And whosoever wills, let him disbelieve. Verily, we have prepared for the Zalimun, the polytheists, the wrongdoers, a fire whose walls will be surrounding them. And if they ask for help, they will be granted water like boiling oil. So, here, whoever wills, if they choose this, they get that. If they choose this, they get that. And then it says here, chapter 3, verse 182, that is because of what your hands have sent ahead, what you have done for yourself. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not wrong you, but you only wrong yourselves. The truth is from your Lord. Let anyone who wishes believe it. And let anyone, sorry, that's the one I just read. Indeed, we have guided him to the way. Be he grateful or ungrateful. This is what your own hands have sent before, and Allah is not in the least unjust to his servants. Like the precedent of the Pharaoh's clan and those who were before them, who denied the signs of their Lord, so we destroyed them for their sins, and we drowned Pharaoh's clan. And they were all wrongdoers. It constantly runs in this point.
Read the ones that I want you to read, 2:6 through 2:12.
Matt, why don't you? Because we're gonna have to go. If you want to give your final concluding remarks.
All right, I'll read them. So you just heard the ones.
I was going to bring it up. Yeah, I was going to bring it up.
I know, but we're running short on time here.
It'll take me about 2 seconds.
Go.
Okay. All right. 2:6 through 2:7, or 2:6 through 2:12. Excuse me. Indeed, those who disbelieve, it is the same for them whether you warn them or not. They will not believe. Allah has set a seal upon their hearts and upon their hearing, and over their vision is a veil, and for them is a great punishment. Now I have to pull up 2:8. That was 2:7.
Sadaqallah al-Azim. So Matthew, thank you for coming on. We'll maybe discuss this later on.
But there's a problem here because Sharif, I'm sorry, you remember he brought this same verse up last time.
Yeah, I know, but just give it on after Matt leaves. please.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry,
Otherwise,
Matt,
it's going to keep
point,
going
yeah,
back and
appreciate you
forth.
coming up.
Okay. Thank you, Matthew. It was good talking
Thank
to
you
you.
guys. I'll talk to you guys again. Have a good one.
Take
Thank
care.
you so much.
Bye.
See you, Matt. Bye.
Yeah, so the problem is Matthew brought the same verse up, like he's only been on the show 2-3 times, and I, what I did is I told him just read a few verses later, and it was a verse that specifically gave context and said that this blinding and deafening and dumbing was a result of, you know, the agent's free act, the choices they made, and he acknowledged that, and he understood that. So it seems to be
I'll read it
case
for
of
you.
coming with the same objection. I mean,
it says they think to deceive Allah. This is starting in verse 9. They think to deceive Allah and those who believe, but they deceive not except themselves and perceive it not. Verse 10, in their hearts is disease, so Allah has increased their disease, and for them is a painful punishment because they habitually used to lie. Verse 11, and when it is said to them, do not cause corruption on the earth, they say, we are but reformers. Verse 12, unquestionably, it is they who are the corruptors, but they perceive not. And goes on further to say, so that's the point.
Yeah.
It's them who have done it, and then Allah increases their disease.
Yeah, and just to kind of really run this point home as well, is that you'll hear them, they'll read this, and then they'll just sort of blanket associate it to anyone who is referred to as a disbeliever. But that's not true, because there is a category of disbelievers who can become believers. And so therefore their hearts are not sealed by virtue of the fact that they can become believers and that they can leave behind what they do. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reaffirms that this kind of disbeliever does exist. In the Quran, he talks about those who, repent, and that the doors of repentance are always open, and that, if they do come to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and there's examples of these within the time of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, people who began as disbelievers, began with a certain mentality towards the religion, and eventually their heart changed and they inclined towards it. Now, that means, by necessity, that these verses that he's pointed out are specifically referring to a certain kind of disbeliever who persists in their arrogance and continues in a particular path which they initiated by their own choices, for which they are responsible, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala completely, I've already read the verses. This is because of what your own hands have sent forward. This is because of what you have done, the choices you have made. You're now dealing with the consequences of that. And he allows people to dig their own holes. If you want to do this, go ahead. And it's not to say that everyone who goes down that particular route can't repent. The doors of repentance are always open. It's made quite clear. But there are some people who are just not going to do that, and they maintain and persist in their arrogance, and they do until their death. And then they adult with us.
I just wanted to add as well, just really quickly. Obviously, he came on initially talking about how there's an internal contradiction, and then he gave an example about, the test, and God knows the test, but yet tests are, defined as those things that you don't know the outcome for. That's the reason why you do the test. And so, you can see how, I think for the audience, hopefully they can see how what we demonstrated was that what he was arguing was not a logical contradiction.
You're here to admit that. Well, because when we went over the definition on the test, I said, is that definition necessary? Or, basically is a logical contradiction? Yeah. And he said, no. Oh, okay. Have a nice day.
And then Abdurrahman explained the soul building concept, the idea that you give somebody a test that what's the outcome is going to be, but you do it for the person, so he builds his spirituality, his moral characteristics, etc. So that now completely demolishes the argument that says that most, if not all, tests are done for unknown outcomes. So he doesn't really have an evidentialist argument, nor does he have a logical argument in order to demonstrate some sort of problem or contradiction in this case.
Just in response, really quick, just in response to Hassan, who said that a perfect book is so confusing. Bro, just because you don't understand something, it doesn't mean that it is confusing. The problem might be from your perspective. A lot of people don't find it confusing, and I think it's very clear. And I think from the discussions we've had with many people, including yourself, who've come on the show, I think it's been made very clear that the problem is with your understanding, because what the book itself says is pretty clear and straightforward.
Yeah, a simple example: some people find calculus really confusing, but it doesn't follow from that it isn't coherent, and that many people do find it completely coherent and understand
what's going on and are
Yeah,
able to use
and
it.
Matt, if he just read a couple more verses, he would know that it was probably 1 + 1 = 2 rather than calculus. I think we need to go to Mr. Delicious. Hold on, before I bring him on, let me take a drink here. Mr. Delicious, welcome, sir.
How you guys doing?
Good. I'm just wondering what's with the name, buddy. Did you come up with that yourself, or is that a nickname somebody gave you?
That's Psalms 34. It says, taste the Lord and see that he is good. So I flipped it and I said delicious. Every time I serve the word of God, is something delicious for the people to taste. So I have, in line with the topic, logical contradictions, I wanted to do an internal critique of one of the titles or one of the characteristics of your God. It says that he's omnipresent. So I'm wondering, if he doesn't enter creation, how can he be omnipresent? And if you say he does enter creation, what is the effects of that?
We don't say he's omnipresent.
Where do you say that
you don't?
God is omnipresent in the Islamic context?
Okay, so you don't believe that? I'm sorry. So you don't believe he's omnipresent?
I'm asking you, where does it say?
I don't know. I didn't. I thought you guys believe that. I thought you guys believe. So you don't believe he's omnipresent?
We don't believe that he's present in like the space of every single place in creation.
Yeah, we don't believe he's permeated through space. No.
Okay, so I want to make it clear. There's no characteristic or of omnipresence as it relates to your God, is what you're saying.
Not in the way that you understand it. No.
Okay, so what does it say? What do you guys say he is?
We believe that he has knowledge of and he's causally active at every point in space, but we don't believe that he's a body or an object that is literally permeated through all of space. I don't believe that God, like there's a piece of God in my drink.
No problem. He's spiritual, so I figure he wouldn't be physical. So we're talking about material stuff right now. Okay, so how about this? Let's go back to what we finished the last time I had to leave. How is your God the creator if he doesn't enter creation? And if he does enter creation, well, you say he doesn't. So how do you connect the cause with the effect? The creator with the creation?
I'm not sure I understood that one.
How do you, because our position is our God had to project himself or pierce or puncture the veil of eternity. And as soon as he did that, time and space was created simultaneously. So creation is outside of the eternal reality. So how did your God create? Did he create from eternity or outside of eternity? And if he did it from outside of eternity, and you claim that he did not enter creation, so how did he create?
What do you mean by outside of eternity?
Isaiah 57:15 says our God inhabits eternity. So that's a different reality from the reality we live in temporal space, right? So
hold on a sec. So are you saying that God needs to enter creation in order to create?
No, I'm saying if he doesn't, then creation itself is eternal because it comes from eternity.
What?
I don't understand that at all.
I don't see how that. So how did you get to that conclusion?
Our God, maybe your God. I want to make it clear. Our God inhabits eternity, so he has to come outside of eternity, project himself in order to create.
What does that mean?
Yeah, I don't. We don't understand what that even means.
You say he had like. So we agree. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has the attribute of being eternal. Yeah. So
okay,
God is eternal.
So where is he right now?
He doesn't have a beginning. He doesn't have an end. That's what we mean by he's eternal.
Okay, so but where is he?
So the question is now. Let's just stay on point. So you said he has to leave eternity. What does that even mean?
I didn't say that. I didn't say that.
You did.
Let me rephrase. No, let me rephrase my words. I said he inhabits eternity, and he projected himself outside of eternity. The light. Remember the Son of God, the light, the sun analogy. So he projects himself from eternity. He punctures the veil of eternity that separates eternity from temporal space, and he projects himself. And wherever the light is, he created. So simultaneously, as that light was projecting from eternity, time and space was created, and everything that's in it. So my question to you is, first of all, does your God inhabit eternity? That's the first.
Is eternity a space?
Exactly, no, it's not a space. No, it's not. It's not a space.
Okay, so then what do you mean by he's inhabiting eternity?
Also, you're saying that because he inhabits eternity, it has to be spatial?
No, we're
No,
not
but
saying,
you're
we're asking you what you're saying.
You're
We've not said
saying
anything
that.
yet.
You're saying that, and then your question that comes after it seems to assume that, and that's why we're asking.
No.
Yeah,
If
we've not made a claim yet. We've not
No,
made
no,
a claim
but
yet. So you've made the claims. We're asking you what you're on about.
No, I'm
There's
saying.
no
I'm
point
saying,
saying you're saying this and blah 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 to us.
No, because you're
not said
presupposing. No, because you're presupposing because he inhabits eternity that it has to be spacious. It has to be.
No. Your question.
No, we're asking you.
Understand that that way.
We're not presupposing it. We're asking you for clarification.
So make it clear. He inhabits eternity. So if he inhabits eternity, it cannot be temporal space. So it means something else, a different reality.
Yeah, we agree. Okay, let me just tell you what the Islamic view. Let me tell you what the Islamic view. The Islamic view is Allah exists without beginning, without end. He's eternal in that sense. He chooses to create. Creation begins at a particular time. Simple.
Okay. So quick question, and then it's gonna lead me to, because I need to understand this. Are you saying your God is nowhere? Is he somewhere? Because our God is somewhere.
See, we just went back to this point when you were talking about inhabiting eternity and then breaking through it with the light, and then we said, well, what is eternity? And you're saying there is no spatial location. So you're saying God, he breaks through this whatever inhabiting eternity is, and now he exists in a particular place. So where does he exist?
No, I didn't say he exists. I'm saying that
you said that he occupies space. He has a place.
I said he inhabits eternity. So when I'm saying he inhabits eternity, when the fact that I say eternity means a different reality. So you cannot conflate that with
right. We're talking
space.
about now, after eternity. Where is he?
So
where is he?
When he projects himself from eternity, he's engaging, sustaining all of creation, which I think your God is also sustaining creation. I don't know. Maybe that's
he is sustaining.
How is he doing that? How is he doing it?
With his power.
Does his power enter creation?
What do you mean? Does his power enter creation?
To sustain the cause is in eternity. The effect is in temporal space. If your power is not entering time and space, then you're not sustaining it. How does he sustain creation?
Power is not a thing. It's not like an object that enters somewhere.
It's an effect, right? It's an effect. So the effect, is it tangible? Is it directly linked?
The power is the cause. The effect is the fact that it's still existing.
Okay, does it have any tangible effects? The power that you're talking about from God, does it have any tangible effect on temporal space?
Yeah, every moment.
Okay, so explain to me, so how is that not saying that your God entered temporal space?
Because God is not identical to power.
Okay, no problem. We'll go with that.
He has power.
We could go there.
Power is an attribute.
No problem. We can go there. So explain to me now, how does that power not overwhelm and destroy temporal space without the containment?
Because he chooses not to. He could destroy it in one moment if he wanted to.
So you're saying he could not be powerful?
I said that he could destroy everything that exists in one moment if he wanted to.
I know, but the power is there. You said is not.
If he removes his power, if you want to talk about it in that language, if he removes his power, as you're saying, if he chooses not to sustain everything that exists, everything would crumble.
I understand that point. That's not the angle I'm going. I'm going with the power itself. Why is it?
Yeah, the power itself is not a thing that is inhabiting creation.
So it has no tangible effect with temporal space.
Power does not have a spatial location. That's the point. It's not a thing that occupies space.
No. Here's the point I'm establishing here. You're saying that your God is powerful. His substance is power, right? Does that power projects itself into temporal space in order to sustain it?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't occupy space. It doesn't occupy space.
So you're not sustaining.
Power is not a thing that occupies space. That's what you're assuming that it is. It's not.
So how is it sustaining creation?
I feel like we're spinning in circles.
Terry, one second.
Wait.
Terry, 1 second. So you said your God. So your God, assuming from the problem you're putting forward, that your God basically his power needs to manifest in creation in order for him to create, right? But before he created, there wasn't space for his power to enter. So how was the space created in order for his power to enter space is what I want to know.
Good question. And I see how Yusuf is smiling. Watch how his face changes when I respond. Because as soon as he punctured The action is from eternity. As
But
soon
this is the
the
thing, when you
cause.
say
Wait,
that-
no. You see.
Go ahead. Sorry. Let him speak. Let him answer.
Yeah, there is no puncturing.
Listen.
That's the
Wait.
point.
No. According to our model, I'm doing an internal
Exactly.
critique.
You're not. No, you said according to our model, and then you're saying you're doing an internal critique.
He asked
That's
me a
not an
question.
internal critique.
He
That's
asked
not
me
an
a
internal
question.
critique.
I asked him. Let him.
I know,
He
but
asked
he's
me a
not.
question.
Yeah, but he's
Yeah,
not
yeah.
doing an
question.
internal critique.
I'm
Go
doing
on.
a Christian model. I'm doing the
Just do it,
Christian
just
model.
do it.
Okay, so just answer the
Yeah.
question. Answer the question.
Okay, so let me do it.
Right.
Okay,
quiet.
so the action is from eternity. The puncturing of the veil, as soon as the puncturing of the veil took place, that separates eternity from temporal space. There was no temporal space. I understand that. As soon as he punctured the veil, simultaneously time and space was created, and as he's projecting his light from eternity, he's creating at the same time. So imagine a light.
I understand.
Imagine
Yeah, I
a light
understand.
projection and creation at the same time.
I
This is the
understand,
big
but
problem with
even
this.
if they're at the same time, if creation isn't eternal, then you would need space that can, like, encompass his power, so that his power can go into it. If there's no space for his power
I just
to
responded to
enter,
that.
then
No,
you didn't.
You didn't.
Let me repeat
This
it one more
idea of
time.
puncturing.
Wait, one second.
No. We heard it. We don't need to.
I
Stop.
punctured,
Let me.
and as soon as he punctured it, there was nothing, right? There was only the puncturing.
If there's
As soon as that
nothing,
puncturing,
if there's
listen.
nothing- No, because this is the bit.
Okay,
that's important.
This is why it's not an internal critique anymore.
Listen.
No, let me say.
Yeah, Tom, go ahead.
In order to puncture, that thing has to exist already to be
Yes.
punctured.
Yes.
The veil exists. The veil already existed.
No. Yeah, but you're
Here's a
into-
logical argument, Terry. In order for your
No,
God to
how about
create, 1 second, his power needs to enter creation. Creation is not eternal. Creation is not eternal. It has a
Amen.
beginning. Therefore, your God couldn't have created because there was nowhere for his power to enter. So that's basically
Can I
what I'm
respond
saying.
one more time?
Unless you're saying that creation is co-eternal with your God and
Yeah,
his
that's
power
ridiculous.
manifests in creation, then you can't really solve this problem, because what Yusuf just said is because you're saying that there's something that's punctured and then space is created. But then how
That's
is
not
the
what I
space?
said. You see, you're not paying attention.
I
One more
am
time.
paying attention.
You do this,
Let me
Terry.
one more
You do
time.
this.
Wait, one
We
second.
directly respond to your
No
comment,
problem.
and then you
But
say we weren't
you
listening.
cannot say you responded to me when you're speaking over me, because you didn't
Go ahead.
respond.
Go ahead. Speak.
I'm
Speak.
one more time.
Go
He
ahead.
inhabits eternity. So
Right.
the veiling is eternal with him. He punctures that veil. As soon as that veil is
And there's nothing
punctured,
outside, right? There's nothing
there's
outside.
nothing outside. Listen,
Okay. Yeah.
As soon as he punctures it, time and space is created as the light is projected from that veil.
So wait.
Listen. Here's the hole. Okay.
Yeah.
He enters. There's nothing, right? And the light comes. Let the light be.
can't
And as the
enter.
light
Okay.
Let him finish. Yusuf, try
I'll
to
mute.
pay attention. Pay attention.
Go. I'll
So
mute.
that
It's
way you
just
don't
really
argue.
frustrating, Terry.
Okay.
It's really
So
frustrating.
the veil, he punctures the veil. As soon as he punctures the veil, time and space, and the light is projecting, right? So picture the light is here right now. It's projecting. Time and space is creating simultaneously as the light is projecting.
Projecting
So,
where?
Hold on a
There's
second,
nothing.
man. Hold on. Let him
projecting
finish.
from the very, as soon as he's projecting, time and space is being created simultaneously.
Okay. Is the veil? Okay, Terry. Let's make this simple. Is the veil a part of him?
No, it's part of what he inhabits. The veil is the eternity. The place where he inhabits.
Well, you said it's a place where he inhabits, but before you said it wasn't a place.
When I say a place, okay, I'm sorry. He inhabits eternity. If you don't want the word place,
What's
but
the veil? Is it a part of him or is it part of
no,
creation?
it's what he inhabits that place, or he inhabits eternity. It's not part of him. It's what he
Okay, then
inhabits.
it's a place. It's a place then.
Okay, but an eternal place.
Okay, and that's my
reality.
point. And before you said it wasn't a place. So now
But-
you
but-
came on here trying to do an internal critique to show a contradiction, and you proved your own possession contradictory.
This is so funny.
I have
And
no,
when
no,
you
but
say
wait,
veil-
Come on, brother.
No, problem. You respond to you quickly.
man.
No
Go
problem.
on,
Because you
go
think
on,
you made a point.
I
You didn't
did.
make a-
Every
Let me tell
time
you
you
why.
come on,
Let me
you
tell
get
you
jammed
why.
up, brother.
No problem.
This is
So let's
light
say
work.
this place.
Light work.
Let's say, and then I'm gonna go to the Quran and try to see how you respond.
No, you're
I'm
done.
saying, okay, 1 second. I said the place is an eternal place, so it's not temporal.
Yeah,
It's
before
not
you said it
temporal
wasn't.
space. No. But listen, I said it from the beginning. It's eternal. So it's not temple,
but it's still
but
place.
listen, it's still
Still
not.
place.
You cannot conflate it with temporal space. So whatever point you're trying to establish is desperate on your part.
No, I'm
it's
showing
not
that you
temporal.
contradicted
It's
yourself.
different
contradicted
reality.
yourself.
Terry, bro,
Different
calm
reality.
down, calm down.
Second,
Okay,
second
Terry,
point.
Terry,
Second
Terry,
point. Second point.
Terry,
Isn't
Terry.
Allah gonna inhabit? Wait, one question. Aren't you going?
No,
Aren't you going to
you're not,
heaven
brother.
with Allah?
No,
Isn't Allah
brother,
gonna be with
brother,
you?
listen,
Terry.
listen. This is the point.
When you go to
brother.
heaven,
your own
aren't you going with
position is
Allah?
contradictory. Your own position is contradictory.
Aren't you going to heaven with Allah?
Your
Terry,
own
if you
position is
think that
contradictory.
God's
what?
power
I know,
needs,
I know.
one second. If you think that God's power needs to enter creation in order for him to create, but you also
Amen.
think he existed eternally alone and there was no place for his power to go, then literally he cannot create. I mean,
What does that mean?
there's nothing simultaneous that can happen because there's no place for his light or power to go. There's no place. You can't say any
Didn't you
simultaneously
say
occurred in his
simultaneously
power.
with the light? Didn't I say simultaneously?
Simultaneously, where's the
But
light
you know-
going, man? There's no place. Listen,
I
listen. Your
I
position
know
is
there's no
incoherent.
place. I know
Yeah.
there's no place.
Yeah.
But as the light has a creating force. So as the light is
Creating-
projecting,
yeah, yeah.
listen, you said not
Ex
paying
nihilo,
attention,
ex
like the last
nihilo.
time.
Yeah, that's the
like that. So if you know that, why are you making a ridiculous statement?
Because that's the point. That's our position. The point is
no. I'm not
the
arguing
point-
ex nihilo. I'm saying,
Okay,
where does it come
I
from?
think- thank you,
Where
thank
does
you.
it come from? It's not ex nihilo saying
Where-
you created
where-
from
where
nothing.
does what-
Where did
where
it come
does what
from?
come
Taylor, thank you.
Creation.
Terry.
Yeah,
No
where does
problem.
it come
Terry.
from? Then you're saying that he was in a place.
So your God is nowhere.
You just said that he wasn't in a place,
knows
and
the
now
answer.
you're saying that he wasn't. He is in a
Our God
place.
has a place. Where's your God at?
Yeah, but you
Nowhere?
said before from eternity past he didn't have a place, and now you're saying that he does. You contradicted yourself. You got
I'm
caught
saying-
out, brother.
I said
You're
place,
0 for 3.
eternal.
You're 0 for
Where's
3
your
like
Where's your
Bardo.
God? Where's
We've
your
got
God
other
at?
You're 0
callers,
for
guys.
3, brother.
Where's your God at? Nowhere.
Listen, delicious.
No problem. No problem.
Delicious.
Your God is
delicious.
nowhere. I we can
delicious.
leave it there.
I'm telling you,
Your God is
I'm
nowhere.
not tasting what
Nowhere.
you're serving, brother.
No.
Not tasting what you're
You
serving.
misrepresented my argument, but you're nowhere.
No,
Your God is nowhere.
No, I didn't.
Your God
no,
is
I
nowhere.
didn't.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for coming on,
I
Taylor.
appreciate it.
Thank
Your God
you.
is nowhere. No problem.
Delicious.
Thanks for
Have a
coming
nice
on,
day.
Taylor. Bye.
Yeah, I'm not tasting what you're serving, buddy. Sorry to tell you.
Ah.
Not interested. I know that Christians believe that they can drink and eat their God, but I'm not tasting it. Sorry.
See, even this notion of veil, like he says the
Well,
veil.
I
of
wanted to bring that
eternity.
in because I thought he was going to say, yeah, it is a part of God. And then I was going to show, well, now there's a hole in the veil and that hasn't been plugged up. So now God is like has a hole in him. But
Even
he
the
didn't
word
even want to
veil.
say that because now he said it is a place, but before it wasn't a place.
Even
So
the
it
word
doesn't make
veil,
sense.
even the word veil presupposes that there's a distinction between that which is veiled.
Yeah, there's something on the
and
other
that which is
side.
that which is being veiled from.
Yeah.
So like he's not
silly.
And then he's saying
Yeah.
it's being punctured. So you've got this thing that isn't God, that surrounds God, that hides it from nothing. So it's not like veiling at all. There's no
Yeah,
veil.
and the power goes towards nothing. I mean, what?
Yeah.
It's like he's thinking of nothing as like just like a vacuum.
Yeah,
or
let's go to
something.
Cool Kid. We got the last person here.
Yeah.
Cool
and
Kid
then-
better be a cool kid. Because
Yeah.
this would be a nice ending if Cool Kid is a
Assalamu alaikum.
Well,
Walaikum
salam.
he's already cool.
Yeah, I just have a question I'm confused about. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, he says, Wallahu khalaqakum wa ma ta'malun. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created you and your actions. So if creating your actions entails determining them, then to say we have free will would be a contradiction, wouldn't it be?
So there's a number of ways to.
Well,
understand
hold
that
on. I want to
particular-
know, do you believe that we have free will?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so how do you answer that? Or you just don't know?
I would just say, I don't know actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sharif.
Yes, there's a number of tafsirs that you can look at in terms of that particular verse. Yeah, one of the explanations is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created your ability to perform the action. So, for example, let's take your hand. Your hand was created that could work, and it was created with the capacity that could steal. So, if you make a choice between the two, you're not choosing outside of the creation of Allah because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created you with that capacity and that capability. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created you and your handiwork in that context, yeah. But also, I think from my memory, that particular verse is actually specific to a particular incident. It's not to be taken generally. I'd have to check the tafsir of that verse, though.
Yeah, I think it's being misused. If you look at in the context of that verse, it's talking about the idols that were Abraham was dealing with. So if you go back starting at verse 83, and indeed among his kind was Abraham, when he came to his Lord with a sound heart, and when he said to his father and his people, what do you worship? Is it falsehood as gods other than Allah you desire? Then what is your thought about the Lord of the worlds? And he cast a look at the stars and said, indeed, I'm about to be ill. So they turned away from him, departing. Then he turned to their gods, speaking about the idols, and said, do you not eat? What is wrong with you that you do not speak? And he turned upon them a blow with his right hand. Then they, the people, came toward him, hastening. He said, do you worship that which you yourselves carve? And the very next verse is, while Allah created you and that which you make. So it's referring to the idols in the previous verse and saying, why are you worshiping the creation which Allah has created when he created you and the idols which you're making, which you're carving? That's what it's referring to.
Okay, yeah, I guess because the translation that I have here, it says do.
Yeah, I understand.
So yeah,
but if you literally read it in context and look at the previous verse, I think it's quite clear.
Okay.
But even on the other reading, I mean, I think Jake is right clearly on that with that context. But even on the other reading, I mean, it doesn't necessitate that he chooses the act for us. So it's the freely chosen act that he actualizes, basically. So God knows what our free choice will be, and he just actualizes that. If you're gonna take that reading of it, but then I think the context that Jake provided is just that's sufficient, really.
Yeah, I mean, it says ta'maluna, which is what you make or what you do, quite literally. But again, in the context, that can very easily be referring to the previous verse when it's talking about it's created you and what you ta'maluna. I mean, what you make. Yeah. So I don't see how there would be any problem there.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I think I just got confused. Yeah, but thanks.
It's interesting, cool kid. Just as a wider point, the Jabriya who denied free will, and they used to use some of these verses to try to justify that. Now, the problem is that when you have certain metaphysical commitments in terms of particular persuasions and beliefs, and then you go to the Quran, you start quote mining the Quran in order to try to prove your particular position, your theological position, rather than allowing the Quran to inform your theological position. So you try to justify it from the Quran because you've already got it in your head what your particular position is. So yeah, I've come across that particular verse, and it's been a while since I checked the particular tafsir of that verse. But it doesn't. I don't think it's not understood in the context that therefore Allah Subhanahu wa Taala causes you to do the action and you don't have any free will. I don't think it's ever been understood that. Abdurrahman gave one possible explanation, which is like an Ashari explanation, and Jake talked about the context of the verse, the verses as well within that context as well.
All right, thank you. Yeah, thank you.
No problem.
All right, bye.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. All right, so that's the end of the show. 3.5 hours in. This whole try to keep it short around the 2-hour mark just went completely out the window. Like, I don't know.
I think you know what I liked. I liked that Matthew came on, and I think he learned something. No, I'm not trying to be like critical of him, but I think he did learn something about what a logical contradiction is, an internal critique, and then more of an evidentialist argument, and the difference between them. So I think that was a good thing. If we can get through to one person, isn't it? It's always good.
Inshallah.
Nobody else seems so convinced.
Well, no, he's I don't know. coming out with stuff like this. So, did we lose Jake?
If the Quran is so controversial and has been for 1400 years, it does not seem very miraculous. No, I don't think the issue is that the controversy of the Quran, like I said, is that certain theological groupings like the Jabriya, like the Mu'tazila, they came to their theological positions because of certain external influences in philosophy, mainly from the Greek positions. And so they've already presupposed certain things without being informed by Islam, and then they retrospectively try to read the Quran as a way to justify. You can literally do that with any book. It doesn't require, I could take data points for COVID-19 vaccines and prove that it's effective, and also try to demonstrate that it's ineffective as well. If I want to quote mine some of the data points, I could say, yeah, COVID-19 causes more deaths. So the vaccine causes more deaths. So, it's literally anything, but rather what you try to do is you try to remove as many of your metaphysical commitments, your presuppositions, and try to read and understand the Quran and let that inform you in regards to your theology, not the other way around. And when you do that, there are no issues with regards to what the Islamic beliefs are. And certainly the fundamental concepts of Islam, are clear cut. They are firmly established. I don't know if Abdul wants to say anything, or Yusuf. Sorry.
I was just going to add that controversy doesn't equate to falsehood either. It's like you can speak to some people in certain parts of the world, and they might hold this notion that there's something absurd. Like I don't know, any of the absurd claims that people deny things that are like
the Earth is flat, or whatever.
Yeah. We didn't go to the moon. We didn't do this. We didn't do that. Yeah, these things, they have answers. They have a truth value.
Yusuf, now that you said we haven't gone to the moon, as a conspiracy, we're going to get loads of comments in the section saying, "Brother, don't you know we didn't go to the moon? It's all fake."
I to be honest, personally, I don't incline to either one. I'm just pointing it out. So for me, because I even understand some of the points they make. Although I wouldn't say that I know we didn't go to the moon. But it's a whole other topic. But
no.
And one I think it might be fun. Yeah,
I don't know about pink elephant.
Let's do an episode on it. Let's do an episode on it.
That might be something different.
But it's a possibility, though, Sharif. It's a possibility.
Yeah.
It's logically possible.
Metaphysically impossible.
Yeah, I mean, on that, I think I'd rather comment on that than the whole controversy thing, because to be honest, I've heard enough today. But the thing about logical possibilities, and I think this is good because it's related directly to the topic of the stream, is that a lot of people take logical possibilities way too seriously. Like I know a guy, a Muslim, who takes the idea that, it is possible that we're in a simulation very, very seriously, in the sense that he literally can't get rid of the question. I mean, no matter how satisfying the answers may seem to be, it's just, that's it. But what if? And that's a problem, because people assume that just because something is possible, then maybe they should lose sleep over it or something. But possibility has nothing to do with plausibility. I mean, something needs to be possible in order, as a minimum criteria, as Jake mentioned, in order for it to have the capacity to be true or to be eligible for that kind of assessment. But that's just a minimum requirement. And I think what we do when we're critiquing things, when we're doing internal critiques of certain positions or worldviews, is that we're trying to show that this position is not possible. Right now, if it were shown that it is possible, that doesn't make it true. I mean, it doesn't solve the problem, and that's it. Suddenly, it becomes true. So the idea of an internal critique is like truth by contradiction is the easiest way to show that something is false, right? So, I mean, if you believe in A and not A, or something that entails it, then that's the easiest way to show that your belief is false, is to demonstrate that contradiction. And again, that's a minimum bar for your beliefs to be coherent. And from there, there's some more work to be done to show whether it's to show that your position is plausible, it's reasonable, and it's actually a justified true belief.
Yeah. So it's kind of hinges on this epistemic way. It's like just right. The age of the universe is a good go-to one. The universe was created 14 billion years ago, or give or take.
13.78 billion years ago. Yeah.
All right, sorry. Or it was created 5 minutes ago. The whole, or last Thursday. Last Thursdayism. The whole universe was created last Thursday with everything in it, including all historical evidences and all memories, etc. Now, both are possible.
Or the pink elephant. Don't forget
the pink elephant. Yeah. Or the pink elephant. They're possible, but the question is like, which one has more epistemic weight? Because we could do it for every possible minute is possible. It could have been done 1 minute ago, 2 minutes ago. You could do it, into seconds, and then you have this sort of infinite number of times at which the universe could have possibly have began. But then the question isn't just like whether or not it's possible. It's like, what reasons do we have to believe this possibility over that one? And just pointing out that 5 minutes ago is possible does not make it epistemically equal in terms of its weight to the possibility that it was created 14 or 13.8 whatever billion years ago. There is evidence that leads you into one direction rather than the other. And so for that reason, you don't have to just jump on this because someone's brought it up as a possibility. It's like, well, okay, it's possible that the universe was created in a simulation and we live in some sort of matrix, but like, what evidence do you have to suggest that one in particular? Like, what reasons are there for that? Simply, other than just pointing out that it's a possibility. You need more than just pointing out it as a possibility. You need more reasons. And people they don't understand this, and they just sort of they flatten the playing field, and just putting forward things as possibilities. They then assume that means that they become equal, and that it's just as possible as that. And it's like, no. Like, it's not just about whether or not you've shown it's possible. It's about, like, can you justify that as well? And yeah.
Cool. I think we should end it there. I think Jake had to go. But I hope people. It's a difficult topic maybe for some people to understand. And I'm looking at the atheists out there. And the reason why I'm looking at them is because I think what I've sensed with a lot of atheists when they watch our streams, it's like they come with a mindset of, I've got to defeat them. I've got to counteract them. I've got to show that they're wrong. And, we appreciate them coming on and watching it and things like that. But I hope they can appreciate that we're trying to help them, as well as the other people, as well as Muslims as well, to really understand how to create an argument. Yeah. And that's why, I hope people like Matthew and others understand how to create a good argument in order to say, okay, you can now understand and appreciate the ideas better. Yeah, on this particular, when it comes to the issue of critiquing other people's worldviews, it's like Terry came on, he said, I'm going to make an internal critique, and he didn't even know the positions within Islam. So, just be good in your argumentations, inshallah. What was that comment? Sharif was really funny, or what?
Would you give a kid poison chocolate? Depends. That's honestly, bro, that is gonna get clipped, and it's gonna like the state of the Muslim community. They want to poison your children with poison chocolate.
Oh god, right. Anyway, Abdul, I don't know if you want to say anything final, or you said what you need to say.
Yeah, I think I'm okay.
Jazakallah khair, brothers. Jazakallah khair to the audience, and for the support that you show all the time, inshallah. Hopefully, inshallah, we'll see you in 2 weeks' time. If actually no, we're gonna do a review, aren't we? Yeah. Let me explain this just before we go. So Abdurrahman had about a 15-minute discussion with Armin Navabi, or whatever his name is.
I don't know. Maybe around 15. Yeah, possibly.
Yeah. What's his name? Armin
Navabi. Yeah.
Yeah, Navabi.
Navabi. I'm not sure.
So he's apparently he's a well-known ex-Muslim. I've never actually watched any of his stuff, but he's a well-known ex-Muslim. He had a discussion with him. We're going to do a bit of a review. It's only 15-20 minutes, but it was a good discussion. inshallah, keep your eyes open for that. That'll be within the next week or so if we get time, inshallah. Otherwise, we'll see you next 2 weeks' time, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi.
So if you haven't already, subscribe. Make sure to click the little bell button and turn on all notifications so you get all the notifications. You can become a member by clicking the join button underneath, or just by typing youtube.com/Thought Adventure Podcast /join, or you can go to our Patreon. The links for that's in the description as well, and you can support us via there. Other than that, follow us on social media at T_A podcast, I think it is. Should have it here. Yeah, here we go. At T_A_ podcast, or you just search Thought Adventure Podcast on Facebook. I think we're on Instagram as well, and we're also on all of the major podcast platforms, including Apple, Spotify, and whichever other ones.
Google.
Google. Yeah. So if you like to download them, you can check us out on there as well. But yeah, other than that, so subscribe, follow us on social media, become a supporter if you would wish to. Other than that, share our content. If just clicking that share button, posting it on Twitter, sharing it with your friends or whatever, word of mouth as well. Mentioning people, and pointing them in our direction is really beneficial as well. Because alhamdulillah, we've shot up recently. I think we're on nearly 8,000 subscribers. Alhamdulillah. So thank you to everyone who's been a part of that and been involved with the support. But other than that, I'll leave it there. So unless you want to add anything.
No, jazakallah khair. And assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
حي على